Hello, and welcome to Select and Start, the podcast about meaningful and memorable video games. I'm your host, Keifer, and every episode I bring on a guest to talk about a video game that made an impact on their life. I have a very exciting guest today. He is a musician, orchestrator, and a composer who has worked in TV, theater, video games, and created this podcast theme song. It's Mike Pettry. Mike, how are you doing today?
Hello. Good. Thanks for having me on, man. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Glad to be here.
Happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on as a guest.
Oh, of course. Yeah, no, it's exciting to work with you. Once again, you compose this show's wonderful theme song. I'm excited to actually talk to you about a video game at length. Before we get into that, though, I do want people who don't have the pleasure of knowing you, I want you to introduce yourself to them. What do you do and what do you like?
Well, yeah, like you said, I'm all those things: a musician, a composer, orchestrator. Most recently, I was a Broadway musician in the show called Parade on Broadway. And before that, I was doing the same thing in a show called Strange Loop last year. So I've been very lucky to have 2 Broadway shows in a row where I was playing keyboard and guitar and actually banjo most recently in those pits. And that's sort of been my very good day job for the past year and a half. In addition to that, I'm also a composer. I've written some musical theater things throughout the years. I've written music for video games, and I've also worked as an orchestrator for a lot of like children's like cartoons and stuff that maybe your listeners have heard of, but I'm not sure how much detail I'm allowed to go on or to go into with the strike. It's on my website if you need to know the deets about that.
Right, yeah. I don't want to be in violation of any strike rules. This has come up before with previous guests on the show because people work in or around the industry. Solidarity, of course. We've covered this before.
Of course.
Sorry, continue.
Yeah, I'm in neither of those unions, but yeah, I want to play it safe. I want to be respectful and respectful of the strike. But your question, what do I like? I mean, obviously, I like Final Fantasies. That's why I'm here. I like video game music. And, video game wise, I like, indies and things that indies that kind of rise to the surface. Like so many adults, I wish I had more time to play video games, but, sometimes it's just a matter of like grabbing an hour or two here and there. But I like playing music. I like cooking. I'm a jack of all trades. What can I say? What do I like to cook? Geez, it sounds like cheating, but I really like meal kit deliveries like systems like HelloFresh and Blue Apron.
Who do not sponsor this podcast.
They do not. Someday though, they might. But they're so helpful to learn how to cook that I recommend them to anyone just to sort of just to get the basics of cooking. So I really just like kind of cooking basic stuff, but just trying to do a really good job of it.
Sure. Yeah. Before we talk about video games, you are a musician. Obviously, we don't have to talk about your work in detail, but I do kind of want to know from you directly as a musician, who do you credit as your inspirations? What do you draw from sonically when you are playing music or writing music?
I mean, it's really hard for me to escape the influence of Nobuo Uematsu, just because I started playing Final Fantasies when I was very little, and that music really inspired me to learn how to play piano and how to write music. So definitely his work throughout, his career, and Koji Kondo, of course. Mm-hmm. But on the other side of things, as a musical theater writer, Stephen Sondheim, of course, was a huge inspiration. When I was younger, unfortunately, Andrew Lloyd Webber was also a big influence for me. And aside from that, I also used to play punk rock when I was younger. So kind of alt 90s rock and punk rock is still kind of part of my whole thing a little bit. Bands like Bad Religion and Propaganda, and some of the classics like the hit Beethoven and all those guys.
Beethoven and Propaganda, yeah. Propaganda? I don't know. I've only seen it written.
I said Propaganda my whole life, and then I started listening to podcasts about them in which they said Propaganda, and I was like, okay, well, I think that's the Canadian pronunciation.
Well, famously, nobody's ever mispronounced anything on a podcast before. No flubs I've ever said out loud are permanently immortalized. It's not even Japanese names that I flub so much. I mean, I do sometimes, occasionally, but the main things is when I cover French Canadian names or something, I'm like, I hope I said this right.
Oh, sure. I mean, I'm interested. I feel like Final Fantasy games, especially have do people say Tifa? Do they say Tifa? Do they say Yuffie? Do they say Yuffie? Like every name is like open for interpretation.
Final Fantasy VIII, it was like, is this Cypher or Cipher? And as a Keifer, I had to like
Oh,
opine a little bit.
yeah. I think I say cipher.
I say Cypher
I don't
too.
know
I'm
if
a
that's
hypocrite.
correct or
It's
not.
spelled exactly the same except with a K.
Right.
I understand why people say my name wrong when they first meet me.
Yeah, they're big Final Fantasy VIII fans.
Yeah, well, we're leaning into the Final Fantasy talk, so I guess we have to lean into video games as a whole now. As you know, as a listener of the show, no community likes to gatekeep more than the gamers, so we do have to check your gaming credentials, Mr. Mike. Let's talk a bit about your gaming history. Who or what got you into it? Your relationship with it throughout the years. What is Mike Pettry's portrait of a gamer?
Well, I actually grew up with video games. So I was born in the early 80s. So I just kind of remember us like having an Atari when I was little and it kind of being like this family activity when I was really little. Like, oh, we're going to play Centipede or Missile Command.
Mhm.
And, when I was, I think like first grade or kindergarten was around the time that the NES was coming out. And I saw it at a friend's house and, saw Super Mario Brothers. I thought, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. So can we get one of these for Christmas? So, then I grew up with the NES and through, then the Super Nintendo all the way, till today. I've kind of had every PlayStation since then,
Mhm.
most Nintendo systems. And like briefly, like I don't really have a gaming PC now, but in the 90s, I sort of did, which meant I could just play Doom and Wolfenstein 3D.
Sure.
But now I also have a Steam Deck, so that has kind of been my re-entry into non-console games or like older games too that I may have missed.
What do you play on your Steam Deck?
Recently, I've been playing Final Fantasy VII, but I've also been playing Dave the Diver. I feel like it's really good for some of these indies that maybe 2 or 3 years ago I would have said, "Oh, the Switch is perfect for," but run a little better on the Steam Deck. So it's been a really good system for that. I've been playing Boulder Skate on more recently, and it doesn't look great there, but it's still like it's nice to have a way to play it. I'm hoping that I'll sort of stumble into like a better, more optimized settings for it. But it's still like the gameplay outweighs it. I'm not playing for the graphics really.
Speaking of, video game consoles, whether it's a Steam Deck, a Switch, what is your favorite console overall?
I mean, I feel like my emotional answer to that is probably the Super Nintendo. It came out at a perfect time for me. I guess I was like 10 or 11 when it came out. And so I just really remember anticipating it and getting it as a Christmas gift. And that was it was a very exciting Christmas morning to like try and plug it in myself and not being able to do it. And my dad was able to help. And then, okay, now I can play Super Mario Brother or Super Mario World and see those sweet Mode 7 graphics on Pilot Wings. It was a big technical jump from the NES for sure. But I also feel like it was such a big leap, like with game design. That's where we get like Super Metroid and the Final Fantasies of 4, 5, and 6, so that it kind of feels like there's more consideration of how to make a good game being taken, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I understand.
I don't know. Super Metroid is a lot more fun than the original Metroid.
Yeah, no, I mean, like with me, like I've tried playing all the original Metroids, and Super Metroid is far and away the better game. Like if people like the original Metroid, I've never heard anybody say like, "Oh, my favorite Metroid is the original Metroid." I definitely you respect it because it's like the
Yeah.
foundation, the same way you respect a lot of the early NES games, but it isn't necessarily the full like playable experience that readable in the same way. And like Super Metroid is still pretty hard by the standard of like this is an older video game and this isn't really something that we expected every single person in the world to play. But it is like significantly easier to get into and it is a lot more in line with modern gaming convention than the stuff on the NES.
For sure. And with like Metroid Zero Mission on GBA, it's like, here's what we kind of thought maybe the original Metroid should have been, and now we know how to do it better.
Yeah, no, the benefit of hindsight and being able to go back to something
Yeah, for
and
sure.
also like sort of underline the inherent appeal of like, we made this first game. There's still some good stuff in there and we'd like for people to experience it in a different way. I think that's a good
Right.
compromise.
Yeah, I remember playing Metroid as a kid, like on the NES, and it felt so revolutionary that you could go left as well as right. So like, just to put it in historical context, is like these things all just kind of felt very new as they came out.
Yeah, I mean, like this is definitely going to be an episode where we talk about historical context a lot. So it's going to
Yeah,
like
for sure.
it certainly factors into the legacy of Final Fantasy VII. You know, you've talked about growing up with the Super Nintendo and the NES. Were you somebody who was playing these RPGs in real time as they were coming out, or did you sort of come into this series later?
No, I played Final Fantasy I on NES when I was like, 9 or 10 or whatever. And, that was sort of my gateway. I don't know if I played that or Dragon Warrior, now known as Dragon Quest, which of those I played first. But I definitely like played those like, yeah, basically in real time and like anticipated Final Fantasy quote unquote 2 coming out for Super Nintendo. Yeah, and kind of thinking that maybe I was done with these games, and then 3 came out, and I was like, oh no, I'm not done with this at all. This is amazing.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I do feel kind of lucky in that regard of kind of growing up in the era where I got to experience these things for the first time as they were happening.
No, for sure. Because I mean, like, luckily, I've lucked into guests who did grow up with the NES, SNES era and were playing these RPGs in real time. It comes up pretty often, but
Mhm.
in terms of like actual market appeal, you know, Japanese RPGs weren't remotely as popular as they are now. It wasn't like a big item. If you look at like the best selling games in North America, you're not going to see an RPG in like that in that top five. But they've
Yeah,
certainly
they
gotten
definitely
more and more
felt
popular.
niche back then.
Yeah, they weren't Kirby.
And it's weird because like I think we forget that like video games used to cost like way more in some way. Like I remember the sticker price on Final Fantasy 3, yeah, a 6 on Super Nintendo was like $80 in like 1993 or 4 money.
Hmm.
So like it did feel like there's a premium on these games because they're long or because they're less popular. It felt like, oh, if you want these, you kind of have to. It's an investment.
Right, because like it is using so much storage capacity, and not to mention like a battery to save onto the cartridge. And that was a
True.
big thing that like really sank Earthbound when it came out. Is like this is a very esoteric game. The advertising makes no
Mhm.
sense. It's aesthetically not pleasing, and on top of all that, it cost $80 in 1995
Right.
money. Bill Clinton, what did you do?
I mean, that's probably like around like $130 or something today. It's just kind of hard to imagine. Yeah, I think we all balked when like the premium PS5 games went from like $60 to $70 2 years ago. But it's just like they used to cost twice that much, like with inflation.
Yeah, and I think and like a lot of people hear that and they don't really necessarily know why, and it's because we switched to discs. Discs are significantly cheaper to mass produce and store, and they're more efficient in storage too. And actually, with the actual cost per item, software dramatically dropped when moved to discs as
Yeah,
like the more standard item. Yeah.
yeah, and I still have many of them. I was gonna save this review till later, but I do have my like original like PS1 discs of Final Fantasy VII with me.
Oh hell yeah.
In a CD sleeve, a book of CD sleeves, which is a very late '90s artifact as well.
No, I have a CD sleeve for weirdly PlayStation 3 games because I don't know what happened, but like I was storing there's a point in my life where I was like, I like keeping the box, but for some reason I have this
Yeah.
sleeve left over from the 90s from like an older brother or like my mom or something. And I was like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep them in the sleeves anyway. And now like after some moves, there's a couple of like PlayStation 3 actual boxes I'm missing, but I do still have the discs. So
Mhm.
it's just,
Yeah.
different generation, which is more uncanny when I'm pulling out like, "Oh, let me go play, the Ratchet& and Clank trilogy."
Yeah.
You have the Final Fantasy games on your disc to this day. Clearly, it means a lot to you if you preserved it in such a '90s fashion. What is your relationship with the Final Fantasy series overall? What are your favorite games? What are some ones that you don't care for? Any hot takes that you have? Let's hear it.
Yeah, I played my relationship with the series was from the ground up, like playing the original Final Fantasy on NES, even though it's basically unplayable now. It's so hard and so time consuming. But yeah, I remember when Final Fantasy IV came out, the US version. It was really I was highly anticipating it because I'd seen it in the Nintendo Power and it looked so amazing, on this new hardware, and I was excited to hear what the music would sound like. I think we like ended up renting it. We couldn't like my parents couldn't find it, so we were able to rent it at a Mr. Video or whatever it was called. my very understanding parents somehow let me like keep the game until I beat it and not, take it back after the 2 days when it was due.
Wow.
So at $2 a day, they literally let me keep that game until I beat it. And then, a couple months later, whenever the next holiday or my birthday rolled around, like still like, hey, can we get this game? Because I would like to keep playing it. And I think I might actually still have that cartridge somewhere. I might have my like original Final Fantasy 2/4 cartridge.
Yeah. To what is now known as 4, because we'll get into it. 4 was the first Final Fantasy game that I played. I played the DS version.
Oh, cool.
So completely different version. One that wasn't nerfed for
I like
US
that
audiences like the original was. So yeah, no, the 4 remake is actually incredible. And on top of it being fully 3D when you play it, and the cutscenes being fully voiced and everything like that, it has like this incredibly animated intro that looks as good as anything that you would see in like a modern console Final Fantasy, and it like that blew me away looking at that on my tiny little DS screen. It's like you went a little too hard on this, considering the vessel through which I'm experiencing it.
I mean, I feel like nobody went harder than like Squaresoft in like the 90s, early 2000s with like those FMV sequences. Starting with Final Fantasy VII, like, and 8 especially has some really wild ones. Yeah, I like the DS version because I feel like it kind of like gives you some more like backstory. There's like a lot more about like Golbez and Cecil as kids, which is kind of weird but also interesting. It kind of felt like caviar. It kind of felt like, oh, I played the original game a lot, so here's a little extra for me to enjoy.
Remakes can be interesting because obviously you can't like do a 1-for-1 if you are planning to like fully modernize a video game like they did with Final Fantasy IV, because even playing Final Fantasy VII, there's so much story stuff that is like, I guess you sort of fill in the blanks, or like it's inferred, but it's never directly communicated. But that also leaves a lot of room for speculation, which
and stuff
is why
you can just miss.
Yeah. So like being able to like add more text to make it feel more like an epic story in like the way that people in the 90s remember.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting and in my personal opinion, a strong execution of it in the DS remake.
Yeah. I think that's also like, if someone asked me today, like, who's never played with Final Fantasy, like where to start, I would definitely recommend that one because it is like pretty short. It's got the best of Final Fantasy worlds where it's like, there's swords and magic, but then also like a tower full of robots.
Yeah, it is a very like, it has all sorts of stuff in it. It has the airships, it has like the weird monsters. It has the active time battle system that people associate with the Final Fantasy series moving forward. So a lot of like the stuff is established.
You've got a Cid, you've got chocobos.
Exactly.
You've got crystals.
You got crystals. And on top of all that, like I mean, obviously the music is fantastic, and it's approachable because I mean, like so many other Final Fantasy games have a gimmick to it, or like a game specific thing that you have to like wrap your mind around. And in this, I think it's the active time battle system was like the thing that they were introducing for this one. So instead, like you don't have to worry about like class assignments and anything like that. You get like 12 party members to choose from. So if you want to try different things, you just put a different person in your party instead, and that's like the thing you're playing with. So I think it is at least like a good like get your bearings game at the very least.
Right. And it's funny that I guess Square thought that they were teaching us how to play like RPGs with Mystic Quest, but I think this game does a better job and is also a much better game. I'm trying to think what other, just to go back to the question, I'm trying to think if there are any of the Final Fantasies I don't like or any gaps I have. I mean, I honestly kind of fell off around 10. Like I played 10 in college, but it kind of didn't grab me the same way as like 7, 8, and 9 did. I've never played any of the MMO versions, even though I just hear amazing things about 14. I just kind of know myself too well. That's like, would not be healthy for me to get into a very good MMO. And 13, I played a little bit of and I got sick of. But who knows? I could see myself going back there, trying it out. Same with 12. Like,
yeah. With the 13, I think it's a question of like if they'll ever let you back in, because that's one of the few Final Fantasy games they haven't re-released in some form since the PlayStation 3.
Oh, that's right. Well, I mean, I still have my PS3 disc somewhere, so I could dig that out and make it work. And just to get all the way to the timeline, like same with 15. Like, I played, I don't know, 10 hours of it and just kind of fell off. Like it just kind of wasn't clicking for me, and I missed the turn-based combat, and it was just kind of a lot of driving around. But still, like all these games that I kind of like am met on, I still like to some extent, and still keep telling myself in the darkness of the night that I will return to them someday.
Yeah, and the other thing is like if one of them doesn't work for you, or if a couple of them don't work for you, that's totally fine. There's still at least a dozen or something else for you to go back to. If you prefer like an MMO kind of thing, you have two options to choose from because 11 is still online to this day magically. And if you just want like here's a battle system you've never goddamn seen before and probably never goddamn will again, play Final Fantasy 12. If you want something
Right.
more more linear, you can try for 13. Like 13 is definitely trying to do something interestingly commercial, but like in a way that like didn't necessarily resonate with the Final Fantasy incumbent crowd. There's so many different flavors to it, and for a lot of people, like I replayed this one is a big thing. Where it's like knowing the beats and where they go and gaining a greater appreciation for it tends to be a thing I hear, especially for the later Final Fantasy entries like 12 and 13 and
Yeah.
15 to some extent. Obviously, 16 is freshly born, so we will see what the prevailing opinion of that comes to be over the years. It's not like the same thing as like the Zelda cycle, where it's kind of like last game better, this game sucks until the end of time. But there is something with like the Final Fantasy things where like either the backlash comes later or the backlash starts and people just end up praising it a couple entries later just because like people go back and revisit it for whatever reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a Skyward Sword apologist. I like that game when it came out, and I still like it.
The Final Fantasy 13 of Zelda games.
Exactly. Although it is sort of, it's almost like a precursor to Breath of the Wild in a way. It kind of feels the same. It feels like it's battling up against itself as like a game in between the two styles of Zelda games.
It is like the scene in Spider-Man Breath of the Wild where like the Green Goblin like pushes a scientist up on the glass and he's like back to formula. It's like people didn't respond super well to the linear stuff, guys. What did we do in the original Zelda game? Let's just do original Zelda all over again in a new medium.
Right.
Let's take 6 years to do it. And goddamn it if they didn't do it and then iterate on it
Right.
again in a fantastic way.
Twice, I would say they goddamn did it.
Yeah. And then people are like, it doesn't have a hook shot. It's not my Zelda. I'm like, okay, man. All right. I missed the hook shot too, guys. I missed the hook shot too. But let's be
That's
reasonable.
funny because my fiance and I do talk about that a lot. We're like, we love these new Zelda games. Definitely miss a hook shot.
Yeah, I'm flying on a hover bike. I'm basically breaking the rules of the game in a way that like they accommodated for. But man, I just want to like point my hook shot at a random tree and then fly towards it. That'd be great.
I mean, with Ascend, as long as it's like a 90-degree angle, you can think you are the hook shot. Your body is the hook shot.
That's a very zen way of
And
thinking
you
about
also
it.
have the joy of being sucked through the material.
Yeah, veering off of a Zelda talk here. So you talked about Nobuo Uematsu being like a big Sonic inspiration for you as a musician. What Final Fantasy game do you think has the best music?
Oh, that's a great question. I think like 7 is my obvious pick. I just love that music so much. I spent time in college like dissecting it. I was like downloading like MIDI files just to try and like parse them and to see how they were orchestrated and learn like what the chord changes were because they were so interesting to me. But it's no secret that like on the PlayStation 1 it didn't sound great. It's like I think it's the most compositionally strong Final Fantasy, but maybe one of the weaker like implementations. You know, I mean, there are some parts that I think sound great and some parts that just maybe don't, because I think Uematsu was sort of like, my understanding is that he was like, okay, this is a new hardware. I don't want to do anything too tricky yet. I don't want to screw it up and, paint myself in a corner. So he just kind of used like general MIDI sounds that like were kind of baked into the PlayStation.
Mm-hmm.
And then starting with Final Fantasy VIII, kind of used like more of his own collected samples. I might have some of those details wrong, but you can definitely say that like you listen to Final Fantasy VIII and hear like, oh, there's kind of like a broader sonic palette going on here.
Oh, for sure. I agree. I mean, like with Final Fantasy VIII, like I think of the games I played so far, I might be confusing myself saying this because I love 7 more as a game. I still love Final Fantasy VIII. I love Final Fantasy VIII a lot. I've covered it on the show. But I do think it's like Uematsu's best stuff that I've heard is in that game. Like I think about the town music and how distinct they all are, and the battle, two different just
Yeah,
enemy battle themes in there that both go profoundly hard. Like it is definitely like
right.
a
Fisherman's
refinement,
Horizon.
a comfort. There's you can feel him getting more comfortable with the PS1 sound chip.
Same with I think Final Fantasy VI is what I thought of as like maybe the one of the best like executions of the music, because like the score is very well written, but it sounds like he has like just mastered the Super Nintendo or Super Famicom like sound chips and like using those samples because it just feels so warm and rich.
Yeah, I think that's something that we've lost in like something we've kind of lost or take for granted now that since the PS2 we've been able to handle more traditional orchestral music.
Yeah.
Music is now as it's written instead of like converted into something that is limited because of the 8-bit, 16-bit, the MIDI era of the PlayStation and Nintendo 64. It's more just about like compression until a certain point, and you hear the intentionality of it. And I think that is like like the rapid evolution of things over like 15 years and having to learn hardware 3 different times over the course of 15 years. You can see even somebody who is like a goddamn master like Uematsu, like he made it work, but you can definitely like feel like him having to learn this thing like 3 or 4 different games across 3
Sure.
and 4 different generations. Like, okay, what can I do now?
Right. Yeah, it's funny like how limitations can fuel creativity, because I often think about like, there are plenty of breakdowns about the original Mario theme and like how the Nintendo only I always forget if it's 3 or 4, but like yeah, I think it's just 3 like channels for pitches. So if you just look at how it's written, it's like similar to like, I don't know, like a Bach fugue or something, how it's just every note is like in a very specific spot to like fill it out and make it feel so much bigger than it is. And it's kind of like, he's forced to kind of like work with these technical limitations to like do something great.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I think about the Game Boy and the Pokemon games,
Yeah.
which I'm still blown away by the soundtracks for Red and Blue and Gold and Silver, because if you like really sit down and like put both headphones in your ear, every single like space that can be filled sonically is being filled in. Those are really complex compositions for something that can only make rudimentary beeps and boops, because this is basically a glorified calculator of a handheld. Like you're watching these things be rendered in black and white, and then you're hearing some like very, very sonically rich songs, and it's like I'm still blown away by it. Every time I go back to it, I'm like, you can hear what this is supposed to sound like. It's very legible beeps and boops, and when they convert it into like the more like in the anime when they like adapt those songs, or like in the later games when they adapt those songs, it sounds you can immediately recognize it. It's not something you have to like tune yourself to.
Totally. Have you heard of a podcast called 20,000 Hertz?
No, I haven't.
The dude kind of like talks about, it's about sound design in our everyday lives. And so there's an episode that's about like the evolution of the Zelda theme. And so he just talks a lot about the technical limitations of that, and like how it was created and how it's evolved throughout the years. It was just really like maybe a month ago that episode came out, so it's pretty easy to find. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I'll have to listen to this podcast because I am very interested in like the arc of things. There's a great, when Brian Eno talks about music, he talks about the second something becomes obsolete, it becomes nostalgic, and the technology we resented for its limitations now become like something that we love and adore and want to go back to and play with more. And I think obviously like some people's relationship with that is what we were alluding to earlier, where it's like I spent a lot of time learning this thing. I accepted the limitations of the thing, and now I have a mastery of the thing. And then like you move on, and then you're in the process of learning a new thing, and this, that, and the other. But there is also just like a sense of like the power of nostalgia and wanting to go back to something that feels simpler.
Yeah, one other thing I'll say is like, I think especially with these Final Fantasy, like these earlier ones, it's like because of those technical limitations, there is so much of an emphasis on melody, which I think is what makes a lot of the music so memorable, is that they have really strong melodies and you get to associate them with different characters. And in a lot of like later ones, when they have the ability to like, have more percussion and more kind of like more kind of soundscapey things to play with. Even though like that stuff might like always be more appropriate for whatever given game or given situation, there is something lost like you know, without having these like strong melodies, which I think are more characteristic of like older games.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. On the subject of music and video game music, you composed the show's theme song, and you did a very good job giving the feeling of approximation of a video game, especially one that doesn't exist because it's a theme song for my podcast. I wanted to pick your brain a little bit and sort of get your sonic inspirations for it, where you went to, and how you arrived at what we now have as the show's theme song.
Oh, well, thank you for the kind words, first of all. And also, I would just like to give my personal appreciation for the original theme song, which I did like very much. And I just wanted to shoot my shot by offering my services. But that the original one it holds a place in my heart.
Yeah, no, it is. I guess it's gonna have like that whole nostalgic feeling soon. But like I don't know how much you've seen of it, but it is a wonderful theme song, and people have been very positive on it. And I'm very grateful for it, because like anytime somebody talked to me about the Majora's Mask episode, which was the sweeping 3-hour podcast talking about my favorite game, everybody was like, "Man, that theme song kicks ass," and I'm like, "Okay, great, no,
Oh,
that's
that's
awesome.
awesome.
I'm so
I'm so
stoked.
glad to
I
hear
am
that.
so stoked to hear that."
And not to break the fiction, but I thought you did a masterful job of like introducing it with the time
Yeah,
loop.
yeah.
But yeah, just to talk about the theme song a little bit, that came to me pretty easily. I think I remember like sitting down to like play Final Fantasy for the episode. It was pretty soon after we talked about it, and I was like, okay, I need to like start. Maybe I'm getting the timeline wrong. But anyway, like I sat down and I was thinking to myself, I should write that theme song, tomorrow or something. I should get started in it. I was playing a game and then I just started like humming the tune to myself. I was like, oh, that would be good. So I got out my phone and I recorded like a voice memo. Ba, 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 da, da, ba. And then as I started playing more, I was like, I bet the bass line would go something like this. And then I was like, well, fuck it. I just went over and like to my computer and then started working on it. And then I finished in one sitting, then just had a computer meltdown and lost the project 100%
Oh God.
after like 2 hours. I was like, God, no, I lost it. And then I was like, I don't feel like doing this exact same thing right now, but I know if I don't do it now, I'm going to not be happy with it's freshest right now, so I got to power through and do it. So then I just like basically just rewrote the whole thing note for note again. And I was like, okay, it sounds the same. I think I got it all. Use the same instruments, use the same groove and everything. So it magically all came together. To me, it was a good happenstance of like that inspiration hitting of like, oh, I think I know exactly what it is before I even like sat down at the keyboard to write it. Which doesn't happen that often, but when it does happen, it's very satisfying. It makes me feel like a very good composer.
You are.
But and just soundscape wise, I wanted it to have like some chip tuney or 8-bit synthy elements to it, so it sounded like, hey, this is most definitely a video game podcast, but still use like real drum samples and guitar and stuff, so that it was like still natural and of today with like a toe in yesteryear, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, no, you did
That
a
was a
really good
lot of
job.
metaphors in one sentence, but
No, I read it, I heard it, I feel it. And it's great because obviously like the theme song before this one was me just going like, all right, what rhymes with start? And then
hey man, that's all songwriting is.
art. Great. Okay, great. I love the Super Mario Brothers 2 theme song. Let's do that. And then that's great. We got it. Nailed it. Got it. And then let's record it in one take.
Got it in one.
Yeah, let's disrespect the whole process of music making here, and then like an actual musician who goes out of his way to compose a theme song for me, loses it, does it again from scratch. I mean, I love it. It's a wonderful theme song. The first time you sent me like when you sent me the whip for it before like you finalized it, I played for the first time next to my roommate Avery. He was like,
Mhm.
That's really good. That's for the podcast." Like, yeah, he's like, "That breakdown's really really good." And he's like, "Yeah, no, this is
Nice.
it's
Awesome.
a great song."
Well, thank you, Kiefer, and thank you, Avery.
Yeah, we love your theme song. Everybody else seems to really love the theme song. I really appreciate you doing it, and I really appreciate having you on the show to talk about a monumental video game that we'll get to in just a moment. That would have been the perfect transition for it, but hey, I have a couple other questions for you.
All right.
It's just like Final Fantasy VII. Like there's like little mini games you have to do before you get back to the main thing.
Oh, sure. We'll talk about that.
You talked about games that you were playing lately on the Steam Deck and everything like that. Obviously, like you grew up from basically the Atari all the way to the Switch and the modern ecosystem of consoles. What are some other games that mean a lot to you that you could have talked about almost as much as you could have talked about today's game?
Yeah, like I think RPGs, from that era kind of are what always kind of connected to me the most. But also like a lot of like those 90s eras like point and click adventures felt formative to me. Like Myst for some reason like really captured me. And so I still to this day, even though it's not a perfect game, I mean none of these are perfect games, but like Myst really and all the sequels I loved playing and sort of loved just kind of figuring out the story and figuring out the world and the puzzles. And I've even like at some point like read the Myst novels that came out. And I also want to take this opportunity to talk about a game nobody remembers called the Journeyman Project, and especially the sequel, the Journeyman Project 2, which was just an amazing point and click adventure about like solving time crimes. You like work for like a time travel organization, and you get framed for like disrupting time, and you have to go in like 10 years in the future to like solve your future self's like the crime that he's been framed for. That's the game that for some reason really stuck with me. Day of the Tentacle I loved. And I think more modern games like Mass Effect, their RPG, is a game I played, front to back, 1 through 3, several times, and love that. But also like Stardew Valley, is a game I've really kind of come back to a lot in the past couple of years. And even games like Red Dead Redemption 2, like I do like kind of like a slow simulator like that.
Yeah.
Not every open world game clicks with me, but like something about that one really like kind of stuck with me and like made me like think about it a lot afterwards. I've only played it once, but another game I had on my list of special games was it's like 10 years old. Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons. Did you ever
Yeah, I
play
know about
that?
that one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the game where you control these two brothers kind of with opposite sides of the joystick. Something about there's like a twist that happens in that game that just kind of blindsided me. And it's kind of like one of the strongest emotional reactions I've had to like any piece of media ever. And I kind of don't want to say anything more about it if that's intriguing at all to you or your listeners. There's just some really great storytelling that happens in that game, and it feels so specific to like, oh, this would not work as a movie. Like it felt like, oh, this is a perfect thing to happen in a video game.
Yeah.
That I always think that is very cool, where it feels like, because a cutscene is just a movie, but like when it feels like this was the special thing about this, like, is so unique to gaming. That's special.
Yeah, no, that's a game I've been meaning to go back and play because I bought it on a Steam sale years and years ago, but the computer that I had, this is like the college laptop I was using, wasn't quite strong enough to run it in a comfortable way.
Yeah.
I said, I'll come back to this when I have a stronger computer. And that you reminded me of it. So maybe I'll check that out soon.
Yay.
Yeah, that'd be great. So clearly a lot of games mean a lot to you, a variety of games too, because you talked about Stardew Valley, you talked about 90s point and click games, you talked about Red Dead Redemption 2 and two brothers. Wait, hang on. I was about to say Brothers: A
And
Way
Myst.
Out, which A Way Out is that other game where it's like two players on the screen, but it's two separate controllers, a completely different type of game.
Oh,
Um,
right.
yeah, Brothers: A Way Out, the Brothers game. Uh, all completely different genres, but we're here to talk about a game that basically changed the entire landscape of video games. One that changed our understanding of the medium. It is certainly one of the most important games ever made. It is the most widely known game in one of the most popular franchises of the medium. It left a meteor-sized impact on the world. It is Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII is a Japanese role-playing game developed by Square, now known as Square Enix, after a series of mergers and acquisitions. At the time, Square was primarily known for developing JRPGs such as the Final Fantasy series, the Romancing Saga series, Secret of Mana series, Live Alive, Chrono Trigger, and so on. Final Fantasy VII was published by Square in Japan and by Sony Computer Entertainment Worldwide. This is going to come up later. It is a game of many firsts. The first Final Fantasy game to use full motion video and 3D character models. It's the first Final Fantasy game to be released on the PlayStation, and it's the first numbered entry to not be released on a Nintendo console. I'll talk more about the specifics of this game and its production shortly, as it's instrumental to understanding why the game has the reputation that it does, why it's held up as a singular entry in a series with so many wonderful video games. But I want to take the time to cover the very basic details of the story and the significant figures behind it. It was produced by series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi. It's directed by Yoshinori Kitase, who also directed Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy VIII, and Final Fantasy X, as well as Chrono Trigger, another one of my favorite games of all time. We've talked about him multiple times in this episode already. We'll talk about him again. The score was composed by Nobuo Uematsu, who was the main composer for the first 10 Final Fantasy video games. Yusuke Naora served as the art director, and Tetsuya Nomura is credited as the character design and battle visual director. This is the first game where Nomura is the lead character designer. He would go on to do this for other titles, including Final Fantasy VIII and X, and would also serve as the director of the Kingdom Hearts series. Final Fantasy VII is so massive, it could not be contained in a single disc. The PlayStation version shipped with 3 discs. A game that dense cannot be summarized quickly, but to briefly establish the premise, the storyline of this game, Final Fantasy VII is a fantasy, wait for it, story with industrial and sci-fi imagery. It is set in the world of Gaia, which contains a life force called the life stream, which is a spiritual energy that gives life to everything on the planet. This life stream is being drained and processed into an energy source called Mako by the Shinra Electric Power Company, a massive corporation that dominates the world, as Mako is the primary energy source for most of the planet. Even though their actions are actively hurting the planet and threatening the life of everything on it, they are able to maintain their grip on the world through their elite fighting force Soldier, a private military group consisting of soldiers enhanced by Mako. They also have a security force known as the Turks to carry out more covert operations. An eco-terrorist group known as Avalanche is working to destroy Shinra and their operations so the planet can recover. The game begins with you playing as those eco-terrorists. What? As they carry out operations to destroy Mako reactors in Midgar. Midgar is the technologically advanced megacity where Shinra is headquartered. Among the members of Avalanche are Barrett Wallace, their passionate leader whose right arm has been replaced with a gun. Tifa Lockhart, owner of the bar Seventh Heaven in the slums that also serves as the headquarters of Avalanche. She's a hand-to-hand combat specialist who cares deeply for her friends, which includes her childhood friend, possibly, Cloud Strife, whom she recruits so she can be close to him. Cloud is the game's lead protagonist. He lacks social graces and struggles with expressing himself, and as such presents himself as a hardened and uncaring person so as not to come off as confused and lonely. When an attack on one of the Mako reactors goes awry, Cloud ends up falling into the city slums where he is found by Aerith Gainsborough, a spunky and cocky flower peddler. Aerith asks Cloud to protect her from the covert ops group, the Turks, in exchange for a date. The Turks are pursuing Aerith as she may be the key to finding the Promised Land, which holds untold amounts of lifestream energy. Aerith is captured by the Turks and then rescued by Avalanche, who learns that Shinra's president is murdered by Sephiroth. Yes, another person is involved now. He is a powerful soldier who is from Cloud's past and was presumed dead. Avalanche must now pursue Sephiroth while being hunted by the rest of Shinra in order to save the world from 2 evil forces who aim to destroy it. Along the way, they meet the rest of their party members, including Red 13, an intelligent quadruped from a distant tribe, Kate Sith, a robot cat operated by a disgruntled Shinra employee, Sid Highwind, a foul-mouthed pilot looking to be among the stars, and some optional party members as well. Crucially important, but also optional party members, Vincent, the vampire-esque kind of guy, and then Yuffie, who is wonderful. Shenanigans ensue. So that's Final Fantasy VII storyline. It was released for the PlayStation in 1997. Other games released in 1997 include Age of Empires, Diablo, Fallout, Star Fox 64, Bushido Blade, Oddworld Abe's Odyssey, Parappa the Rappa, Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and GoldenEye 007, which I previously covered on the show with Jason Kleberg. Real quick, you played video games around this era. Have you played any of these games?
Yes, I definitely played GoldenEye a little in college. I kind of was late to the N64, but that was like a good college party game. I played Diablo for sure. Oddly enough, the very first Diablo is kind of like the one I've spent the most time with.
Mm-hmm. That lines up with you being a PC gamer in the 90s. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There was another. Wait, what were the last three games you said?
Parappa the Rapper, Crash Bandicoot, Castlevania Symphony of the Night.
That's it. Yeah, Symphony of the Night. I definitely spent some time with too. That was a good one.
Yeah.
Great music,
Fantastic
and
music.
also famously, you could put the CD in like a CD player, and it would play the soundtrack.
Yeah, I love little things like that. Look, there were a lot of great, monumentally important video games that came out in 1997. GoldenEye 007 changed our perception of first-person shooters as something that could be played on consoles. Castlevania Symphony of the Night took the formula that we established with Super Metroid and put it into
Mhm.
a different series, creating a name that frustrates many people. Metroidvania. Get over it, guys. We understand what it means. Terminology is meant to convey something that we can understand in a shorthand manner, and we understand it. I know that it doesn't necessarily apply to every game in both series. We get it. We get it. We get it. Anyway, what ultimately made you decide on Final Fantasy VII?
For me, Final Fantasy VII is just, especially like the first 10 or so hours, like just has such a strong vibe to me. It is something that like I just always connected with. I've come to learn that I just really love a cozy slum in a video game.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole opening sequence and like Seventh Heaven and like Sector 7 in the game just have such a great feel to them. The city of Midgar was so interesting to me and is presented in such a beautiful way of how you kind of like, start in this dark reactor and then it kind of opens up to like a subway. What? There's not subways in Final Fantasy IV. I mean, I guess there's famously a train in Final Fantasy VI. But despite there being like technological things in earlier Final Fantasies, this is the first one that felt like modern to me because it felt like kind of like New York City in a way. It felt like, oh, there's this subway, there's this kind of like grosser parts of town, and then there are like nicer parts of town. Something about the color palette is just so like warm and inviting, and also so very 90s in it. There's like green light and stuff. The story's not perfect. There's a lot of like question marks, the further you go down the line, but I think the story is very good in what it's setting out to do. I think it's cool that there is a main character who's flawed, who you learn later is like a main character who's not the chosen one, which is so antithetical to like RPGs where it's like, hey, here's a sword from the moon because you're the moon's son, or something like that. You learn in this game, you're like, no, actually, Cloud, you were the reject, so you were kind of like the failed experiment. I thought that was very cool, and I kind of always love those stories about like the idea of fate being wrong, or that you can like change your own destiny, or things like that. Yeah, that's kind of like why this game to me has like survived for so long. I love the backgrounds, the environments in this game, but like when you're looking at the polygons, it's kind of one of the worst looking Final Fantasy games in a lot of ways. I think despite all that, like the hooks of these characters and like their relationships is so strong, and like, I don't know, warm is just is the word I keep coming back to, that it just like feels so good. And that might be just personal to me, like, because I think I have this connection where, I don't know, what, this game came out when I was maybe 16. Yeah, 97, I was 16. I had been like really getting into like music and like playing in like, a band and stuff. So I wasn't playing that many video games anymore. I kind of took like maybe a couple years away. And I remember was it my show choir? I was in show choir in high school, and like going on a class trip to New York City for some competition or whatever. And somebody brought their PlayStation and they had the demo of Final Fantasy VII, because I don't think it was out yet, being like, hey, you should come over to our room and check out this demo. If you like the old games, you'll probably like this. And I was like, I don't know, Final Fantasies, I'm kind of done with that. And I played the opening sequence. I was like, fuck, this is great, actually. Not long after that, I like went to a pawn shop and got a used PlayStation. I think probably the first console I bought with my own money, and went and bought Final Fantasy VII just so I could play this and keep experiencing it. And I'll also say I got a cheap memory card, a Mad Catz card that was supposed to have several pages of memory cards in it, and it was cheaper than the Sony one, but it was very prone to failure. So I ended up playing the opening sequence of this game many times because I would just turn on the PlayStation and be like, "There's no data on this thing," and I'd be like, "Well, I like it enough that I want to see what happens next."
Thank God it has one of the best openings in an RPG ever, or you'd be in trouble.
Exactly. And it would skip a lot for me. I feel like I had a kind of a shaky, used copy of the game, so it would I'd have to clean it, or else it would scratch and freeze during those FMV sequences.
Right. You touched on a lot of points there. I think this is a wonderful video game. It has so much going for it. You play it in 1997 and there's nothing quite like it. The characterization is very interesting, like you said, at this point, RPGs that we were familiar with and a lot of stories that we were familiar with in that kind of fantasy setting deal with chosen people. And this game is basically subverting a lot of stuff in terms of, not just the characterization of Cloud, but also the Chosen One narrative in general, which makes it so interesting in its place in RPGs and especially JRPGs in the West, because this game that is so foundational to our understanding of RPGs in our side of the world is breaking so much of the convention of what was established before. And then obviously, like what you said, Cloud is a guy who is deluding himself, thinking he is a Chad when he is in fact the Virgin. I made myself the cool guy in this meme, and you're the sad and angry person, so I win the argument.
Or maybe he's the guy in the meme, the guy in the corner of the party, saying to himself, "They don't even know I was in Soldier."
You weren't in Soldier. You passed out on the bus. You were sick. Anyway, this podcast, Mike, is about meaningful and memorable video games. And when I say that, I'm usually talking through the lens of our guests and their personal experience with a game, the impact it made on their life, on your life, we should say. That's why I spend the first third or so of every episode talking about the guest and getting to know the guest and their taste and everything, because it's important to understand somebody's emotional relationship with a video game. And I'd like to get to know the person first. I don't want to just jump right in, unlike this game, which does jump right in. Maybe some people get frustrated when they click play on an episode of Fallout New Vegas and they hear me and my buddy talking about wrestling and butt rock for almost an hour. But this is the podcast I want to make. I'm sorry. The point is, this podcast isn't an oral history. The main goal of this podcast is to get new perspectives. It's made me see video games in a different light doing this podcast. It's got me to play games outside of my usual comfort zone. It's introduced me to so much. And by making the conversation personal, it takes a lot of pressure off of the guest. It takes a lot of pressure off of me. And it keeps me from having to be comprehensive when discussing a video game. I don't want this to be about, here is Final Fantasy VII from every single angle. I'm sure there are 9-hour video essays you can watch about that. There's a good oral history from 2017 on Polygon if you want a production history of this game. What people thought being made. It interviewed over 30 of the developers that worked on the game. It's pretty thorough if you want that kind of stuff. But I say all this, and I'm going to have to contextualize Final Fantasy VII a little bit in this episode and do something a little different, because it's often referenced as one of the best games of all time. And this is the Final Fantasy game that people are most familiar with. And there's more to this game's legacy than just it being an especially good video game. It's important. I love this game. This is a game I played for the first time in 2020, and I loved it. It's 23 years after its release, and yeah, there are dated elements to it, but I certainly love this game a lot, and I understand why it has the reputation as being a really good video game. But I'm going to say something. Maybe it's a hot take. Maybe it's a risky take. I don't know.
Go for it.
Final Fantasy VII is one of the most important and consequential video games ever released in terms of what it represents to the industry at large. And we're gonna both talk about this, but some notes I have right here. We have to keep in mind that this game was released in 1997. Let's think about what is in the surrounding landscape. I mentioned those games earlier. The first Diablo game is out. The first Fallout game, right? This is the year that Castlevania Symphony of the Night comes out. This is a year after Super Mario 64. So this is still a generation that is establishing a lot of what we are like as like a lot of big mainstays. Like we're just now getting 3D movement, 3D environments. A lot of franchises are being born here. But at the same time, stuff is still happening, right? Like this is a year before Metal Gear Solid. This is a year before The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And it's still a full year before Pokemon Red and Blue would come out in North America. And that's the thing that's crazy to me. Is like we don't even have Pokemon yet in America when this game is coming out to yeah, it wasn't. This is important qualifying information. And we also need to understand a little bit about how this game came to be and why it took the shape that it did, because this is a game that in a lot of ways is hugely important. I said like I don't want to cover a game comprehensively, but there are a few things I really, really have to say at the top before we talk about the game's emotional impact on us, because we talked about it a little bit earlier. JRPGs haven't penetrated the West yet. And it's a crazy thing to think about, but this is the 7th entry in what is the second most popular RPG from Japan. The most popular RPG from Japan is fucking Pokemon, and it's the highest grossing media franchise of all time. And number 2, Final Fantasy, which is a phenomenon in Japan, but it's also very popular in the rest of the world.
Yeah, it's also funny, like, I'm also remembering back then, we didn't use the term JRPG because, like, it was just RPG. Because, like, RPG had not settled into, like, the American concept of gaming yet. So that it was just, like, anything that was turn-based, anything that was character-based, really, was just an RPG. That's something that just occurred to me just now.
Yeah. The first thing I want to talk about is like, you know, the Western push in terms of making Final Fantasy VII this massive phenomenon, because this was a very conscious thing that they did. And I guess I said I want to talk about that first. I guess I have to talk about how this game came to be. I'm not going to hit every single note here, but a thing that we take for granted now that like Sony is like this big console juggernaut, is before then, you know, Nintendo were the big cats on the town. And the reason I'm trying to find a good way of saying this without pissing off people who love Nintendo, because I love Nintendo when I say this.
I love Nintendo too.
When they were at the top of their game in like the NES and the Super Nintendo, they had a lot of power that they could throw at people who wanted to publish video games on the Nintendo consoles. And this created this relationship where they could be like, well, you have to do this if you want to be released on a Super Nintendo. A lot of the localization woes of games like Final Fantasy II or Final Fantasy IV, as it's now known in the rest of in the whole world, they had to like censor a lot of imagery, because it's like, if you want to release this over here, well, Americans are weird and they can't handle that kind of stuff. And you know what? Fair point. You need to make this game easier.
They were wrong, I guess.
Yeah, like they didn't get to play a real Final Fantasy 2 or 3, so they're too stupid to play this game. You got to fix it, and also don't say die, and also don't reference any Christianity. Is Jewish stuff okay? Yeah, Jewish references are okay. Yeah, very interesting relationship of Jewish imagery and Japanese video games. Like I'm very fascinated by that subject, and I hope there's really good writing on that, because I'm fascinated by that in Pokemon, the Final Fantasy series. A lot of JRPGs have like a really strong, like very overt reference to like Jewish apocrypha, mythology, and the Tanakh and the contents within.
Oh, I don't think I knew that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, no, it's like something that like anytime you see Leviathan in anything, that's
wow.
Yeah, we're digressing within like a digression within itself. So, but yeah, no, like now Sony comes in and they are dead set on making the PlayStation the biggest thing ever. They're among the people burned by Nintendo because they were going to collaborate and make some sort of console together. It didn't pan out. Sony decides to do their own thing. And Square is one of their most reliable third-party people that they work with. The Final Fantasy series, very popular in Japan. Like, they don't sell poorly in America when they come out here, but several of them didn't, because Square publishes a lot of their own video games at this stage in their life. And like, it's up to them to like make those decisions and to release things or not. And when they do, Nintendo gives them a lot of feedback as to like releasing them. So it's like, do we go through the effort? Like, is it worth the time? Is it worth the money? Is it worth the energy? And then here's Square. Square's like, look, discs, right? Discs, you can make a bigger video game, right? Number one. Number two, you have a problem with the publishing in America. We'll publish it everywhere else. You can publish it in Japan. We'll publish it everywhere else. They did get some notes on a localization initially. There was like a plan for them to not do the honeybee sequence at all in America. And then like they got a lot of like negative feedback from the developers and like the American fans American fans who were hearing about this, and they're like, no, don't do that. And they're like, okay, yeah, fine. And then like from then on, Square was like, look, you can publish it, but like don't fucking touch anything. And like, deal, we want the video game, right? We're also gonna like make this massive push, this marketing push. We'll like front the money to like really market this thing. The production budget for Final Fantasy VII is the biggest any video game has ever been at this point in time. More people worked on this video game than anybody else had ever worked on a video game at this point in time. It is literally the biggest video game of all time. I want you to think about this for a second. This reliable third-party publisher for Nintendo, scalped by the competition, given more money than God, told you can do whatever you want, just make it big, make it flashy, show everybody that we have a big dick, basically. And then they deliver on it. And then they're like, now we want to make sure everybody in the world plays this game. We're going to buy advertisements on like primetime television. When you're watching The Simpsons, when you're watching SNL, they're going to see TV ads that are going to sell this game as the most like important event of the year. And it's like, it's too good. It's too big to be told in a movie. It has to be played and experienced for yourself. The commercials for this game go hard. I watched them for the research of this episode.
I don't think I've seen them.
Beyond the edge of reality lies a story of ultimate conquest, a story of war and friendship, a story of a love that can never be, and a hatred that always was. And now, the most anticipated epic adventure of the year will never come to a theater near you. Final Fantasy VII.
PlayStation.
The commercials are insane, and they don't show a single minute of it's like a single second of gameplay. It is all cutscenes. It's like, look at this.
Yeah.
And look, the game is great. I'm not saying any of this to undercut the game, but
those cutscenes are amazing.
Yeah. Huge marketing push. And here's the thing. Hugely successful. Critics love it. It is immediately like hailed as a critical masterpiece. Like it's critically acclaimed. It's a masterpiece. It wins so many Game of the Year awards. It sells insane amounts everywhere. It is the second best-selling game on the PlayStation 1. Think about that.
Wow.
A JRPG only outsold by Gran Turismo.
That's wild.
And keep in mind, the PlayStation, the best-selling console of all time at this point in time. And like it has been since outsold by the PlayStation 2 and a few other things, but like at this point in time, they not only beat Nintendo, they beat them by a significant margin in terms of console sales. They are able to scalp their competition so thoroughly. They make the biggest video game ever made at this point in time. It hits every single thing, financial gamble they made making this game hit.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that like factors into like this being the biggest game of all time. And in addition to that, like the big part of this big Western push, the game is so huge, they need to like get an international production team going. So Square expands. They bring in American people to work on the FMV scenes. They bring in people not just from the video game industry. They bring in movie people who worked on True Lies, people who worked on the Terminator 2, Star Wars, Jurassic Park. Like these are people that they're bringing in who like know special effects so they can make this game as flashy as possible.
More than 200 animators and programmers. A multi-million-dollar production. Over 2 years in the making. And a cast of thousands. They said it couldn't be done in a major motion picture. They were right. Final Fantasy VII.
PlayStation.
And that's a big part. Like the Western sensibilities become a big thing in Final Fantasy VII in a way that it hasn't necessarily been a priority in previous video games. Like the developers were listening to a lot of like My Bloody Valentine. So you see references to Loveless all over the place.
Oh, sure.
This is the first Final Fantasy video game with a black character in it. It is an attempt at like bringing in a broader appeal.
Yeah. First game where they cuss too.
Yeah, there's a lot of cussing. It has an edge to it. Like look at Vincent and tell me that wasn't trying to like win some sort of cool point. There's a lot going on here.
It's got like a The Crow vibe to me. It's a very 90s like tortured vampire man.
So much of The Crow. This is a blockbuster in the form of a video game, and it's a seismic shift in like I have to qualify like our discussion of Final Fantasy VII with this information because I think that kind of has gotten not lost, I guess, but it is something that like needs to be considered when people are talking about this game among the numbered entries of the Final Fantasy franchise, among all the other video games that have been released before or since. Like, I think I can be told I'm wrong here. I'm not trying to be reductive when I say this, but like when like people talk about like the most consequential video games ever released up to this point, almost half the time between like the release of the NES through the Nintendo 64 era, like half of those games had the word Mario in the title.
Right.
Like there's other video games that are important during this time.
Mhm.
Doom is a big one that like changes things, but you know, after Mario 3, Mario 64, Final Fantasy VII, it is also like super consequential in terms of like the shape of everything that comes after it, because so much of everything that comes out is a reaction to it.
Yeah.
Especially within Square, people who are releasing games who aren't Square. Nintendo is like really humbled by all this, because like this is like representational of like what went wrong the second like they become the underdog. Not even the underdog. They just get outflanked sufficiently. They have to like react to this. It's like ground zero for all of this. It's huge.
Yeah, and I imagine like they probably, like a lot of people that were fans of Final Fantasies on Super Nintendo were poached like over to the PlayStation. Because if you think you're like a kid, your parents will only let you have one system, maybe. Like you're going to go to the one, if you love Final Fantasy, you are going to go to the system that has it, even if it means you will not be able to hang out with your very good friend Mario.
Yeah. It's like, do you want to make a 5-hour Final Fantasy game on a Nintendo 64, or do you want to play an epic on the PlayStation 1? Discs,
Exactly.
motherfucker. You have to get with the times, asshole. Yeah, Mario 64, fantastic game. Phenomenal. This is a 40-hour fucking video. At least. But yeah, no, important game.
Yes.
Any other points you want to make in terms of like the times around? Because you actually played this game around the time it came out. Like,
yeah, I was maybe a little after, because I don't think I played it right when it came out, but it was like the first time I saw like a normal dude in my high school wearing a Final Fantasy VII shirt, just wearing a video game shirt. Like,
yeah.
I don't know if that was like a pre-order bonus, but it was a guy who like wasn't like a computer lab kid wearing a video game shirt, and that felt monumental to me. I was like, this is interesting. There's something happening here.
Yeah, this is a video game. Like, it's an RPG. It is a turn-based RPG.
Yeah.
It doesn't fundamentally like rewrite in terms of actual play style, like our understanding of an RPG. It makes it more inviting to people who haven't played or grown up playing this genre for sure. Really, it's like its aesthetic and narrative is like the big like things that make it stand out. Like, this game has guns in it. Like, even if you are playing like a game that like is a previously like associated with nerds, it's inviting you in because it's like looking so cool and distinct.
Yeah.
We'll talk about what this game means to you on a personal level in a moment, Mike. But before we do that, I do want to talk about this game's availability in a segment that we do every episode called No Country for Old Games. I'll try and do this one quickly because I just talked so much already about this game's development and contemporary impact. But I always have to make time every episode to talk about the subject of video game preservation. It means a great deal to me. Over time, hardware becomes obsolete, and even games released on a console as significant as the PlayStation become lost to time. And I just, gave Sony and Square a lot of praise in terms of how they were able to handle things in a competitive sphere, and that's my business degree talking. That's the interesting stuff. Like, the one interesting thing about like my business degree is I like looking at these like battles of the past, or Coke versus Pepsi battles, like what was going on here. But these things are bleak in practice because it's a money game. It's all a money game at the end of the day. And Square especially is notably bad at how they handle their properties. Square Enix, as it's now called, is one of the great consequences of the success of Final Fantasy VII, because they got so big that they got so much support from people like Sony, and the people who publish these games on their consoles, that they just don't do a lot of their stuff themselves, and they have to be like dragged by the seat of their pants to like re-release anything.
Yeah.
So many people can't play Chrono Trigger now. That's one of the best games ever made.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, maybe you get like an inferior Steam version on PC and that's it. Sorry, guys. It's an uphill battle, game preservation. And instead of making games more readily available, Square is usually content to just like sell off certain video game properties and invest in crypto 2 years too late and hope for the best.
Oof.
But enough dunking on them, because this is probably a bad time to bring this up, because this game's actually pretty well preserved in the grand scheme of things. So the game was originally released PlayStation 1997. We just talked about that whole rigmarole. At the same time, they were developing a PC port for the game that was published by Eidos Interactive, released in June of 1998 for North America and Europe. This port would not be released in Japan. Square Enix's relationship with Eidos over the years, also a very interesting bit of history to read up on. But let's talk about Final Fantasy VII. So yeah, there's a PC port of this game. This PC port is actually a huge deal because future versions of this game would not be built off of the PlayStation 1 version of this game. They were using the source code from the PC version instead.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
When you are looking at these re-releases, they're all kind of built off of the PC port. Final Fantasy VII was re-released digitally on the PlayStation Network in 2009. This version was compatible with the PlayStation 3, the PlayStation Portable, and the PlayStation Vita. The aforementioned PC version of Final Fantasy VII would end up providing the source code for future ports of the game. French developer .emu updated the PC version of the game so it could be played on modern operating systems in 2012. This version would be the first time a PC version of Final Fantasy VII would release in Japan. Their version of the PC release had quality of life features, including a high-speed mode, a toggle to turn off random encounters, and a toggle to activate maximum stats and unlimited limit breaks, which is the ultimate attack in the game. Later ports would be based off of this PC version and feature these enhancements. They would be released digitally on iOS, Android, PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, and Xbox One. The PlayStation 4 and Xbox One versions of the game can be played on the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series S and X. And a physical version of Final Fantasy VII was released on the Switch alongside the Final Fantasy VIII remaster in 2019. So, yes, I dunked on them. Yes, they're a stupid company, but I got to give them credit where it's due. This is about an A for availability, if there was one.
Yeah, for sure.
It can be played on all currently supported consoles, as well as your goddamn phone. You can buy a physical version on at least one console. It's a miracle, people. It's an A from a company that generally sucks and doesn't market their video games or know how to sell them or understand their audience. But hey ho, congratulations, you crypto nerds. You did it. When you want to replay this game, Mike, how do you do it?
Well, I hope this isn't too controversial of a take, but this time around when I played the game for the show, I did use an emulator. I played the original PS1 version on my Steam Deck via an emulator, but I feel comfortable admitting that because as I said earlier, I still own my PS1 discs, and I've also bought this game. I'm trying to think the other versions I bought. So I had it on PlayStation. I had that original PC port from 1998. I think I had the Vita version. I've also played on, I think I also have the PS4 version, and I definitely have the Switch version. So I have many Final Fantasy VIIs.
Yeah, there's so many Final Fantasy VIIs. You don't know how true that is. You do, actually. I'm sure you do.
Right.
Yeah, normally I rate games on a scale of A to ARG. ARG is obviously me saying that, like, oh man, it's so hard to get video games. That sucks. And is not me covertly advocating for piracy in any way. That's illegal. Breaking laws is bad. Don't commit eco-terrorism. No. Anyway, the point is, Rare Square win on the availability of this game, and it makes sense that they would make this game so readily available because it is basically the shadow that they live under in terms of like, and I'm not saying that to like make fun of all their like future games. In this same year, they release Final Fantasy Tactics in Japan. They have great fucking games, guys. It is not the games that are the problem. It is the people in charge of the company. I need to emphasize that so much because people lack nuance in their thinking. I'm sorry. I'm just, I'm being petty today. I don't know why.
That's all right. You're just anticipating every person on social media who will have a hot take on Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, this is just a segment where I get to be petty, and there aren't a lot of people who will defend the corporate level of Square without being like the biggest bootlickers in the world. If you guys hate Chrono Trigger that much, I get it. But like, isn't it a miracle we got Live Alive on the Switch? Think about
also
how we have
miracle
to fight for these
the
things.
Final Fantasy VIII re-release. I thought that would never happen. That remaster.
Yeah,
I replayed that on Switch. I was like, somehow it looks so good too.
yeah. It's just like it's not a bad thing to wish things were better, but this game, this company's a Final Fantasy VII company. They re-release and remake this game so many times. On a corporate level, I do not think they fundamentally understand the themes of this game or its purpose and point.
That's true.
There's certainly been some good out of it. I'm a huge fan of the Final Fantasy VII remake. Or I should say I'm a fan of Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is not a remake, but a continuation of the Final Fantasy VII storyline of some kind of alternate universe kind of way.
Right.
Again, we'll come back to it. But no, I'm glad this game is readily available because it's a hugely popular video game. The original PlayStation version holds a 92 out of 100 on the review aggregation website Metacritic. It was the second best-selling video game on the original PlayStation, beaten, again, only by Gran Turismo. As of January 31st of this year, Final Fantasy VII is estimated to have sold over 14.1 million units. It is so popular, Final Fantasy VII, that it exists as a franchise within a franchise known as Compilation of Final Fantasy VII, and multiple spin-off games, a sequel film, an OVA, a remake series, and other forms of media, all existing under the Final Fantasy VII label. But we're not here to reduce Final Fantasy VII to a series of stats, sales figures, and countless media properties. We're here to talk about the original game and the impact it had on somebody who played it. So thank you for being so patient as we talk so much about the different angles of this game. But it's fine. It's finally time to talk about the core of this whole thing. Your emotional
crisis
experience
core,
with it.
if you will.
Yeah. The crisis core.
Which I have not played.
Neither have I. What do you love about this game that you wish more video games would do?
You know, like I said earlier, there's something about like the vibe of the game that is so correct or just so like enticing. And it feels very like, at least in the first part of the game, there's just like a unity to the experience where it just feels like it all feels connected. Like the music, the cinematics, the stories, the character, and the character's motivations are all really kind of like, you know, coming together and operating at a good clip. So it all feels like it's just really inviting. And I feel like, I don't know, sometimes games can take a little too long to pull you in, or you just kind of feel hiccups, or you feel the seams too much, which, you know, I'm usually very forgiving of that kind of stuff, but there's something about how well this game in particular keeps all that momentum going from the beginning in the first, 5 hours. Another thing about this game, like I've talked about Midgar and how cool of a town Midgar is, but like really, like all of the towns in this game, I just love so much. I just like Calm has a cool, unique look to it. Nibelheim has a unique, cool look to it. The Junon, the harbor town, both the down by the sea area and like those kind of weird apartments like up by the naval base, like are just all very unique. And I'm also talking about the interiors of all the houses. Like there's just so much detail in each of those like little houses with their little cabinets or their like stoves and stuff. And which is not even to mention like just the kind of random characters walking around. There's just like a lot of weird little details to this game. That's another thing I like about this game is like when you dig down to it, like a lot of these details are just so like kind of unique and weird. And I like that a lot. Some of the things connect like to the bigger story, and some don't. Like I'm thinking of the guy in the slums who's like has Mako poisoning, who I know there's some theory. Is that Zach? Like the guy that's kind of like bobbing up and down in the slums?
I'm sure that's an interpretation. I've never thought that because I don't think about Zach on principle.
Yeah, I think I might have incorrectly made that connection when I was younger. Like, oh, I think that's Zach. But like, even if it's not, like, just the fact that there's a guy there, and you kind of don't know until later in the game about like the tattoos and the reunion. It's just like kind of building like piece of this world. And that's a mistake I think other games or other, stories make, is like giving you too much too soon, like too much exposition. And this is like such a rich world, but it is not all thrown at you at the beginning. There's not like a sequence that tells you like 500 years ago there were 3 warring nations. I just have so little patience for that stuff. Like I really wanted to like triangle strategy last year, and it was just like there are 3 nations who've been at war, and I'm like, oh no, come on, please no. I want to have the brain capacity to like dig down into lore like that, but I much prefer something that's kind of like inviting and just kind of doles it out very slowly.
Yeah, let's go on that point for a second here. Like this is a game that is like appealing to newcomers to the genre of RPGs, as well as changing things for the people who are accustomed to the genre. It's inviting to both crowds, but the genius of it is the opening, right?
Yeah.
Like you're talking about, like there's no text or narration until like seconds before you pick up the controller, and it's dialogue. The whole opening cutscene, it's like this wonderful like view of the opening setting of Midgar. It's detailed, it's cinematic, it's insane that they did it, and it immediately is pushing itself into the action scene where your player character Cloud is on top of a train that is going to the Mako reactor, so you can go and commit eco-terrorism, as you should. And it just flows so well. Not a word is spoken from the time you press start until the time you pick up the controller, and it's the character's yelling at you like, we gotta do the plot now. Let's go do the plot. Let's play the game now. Great, let's do it. It's so seamless, it's so good, it's so quick, and it's not what we generally associate with the genre. We associate it with like a lot of like setup, and this game jumps right into the action. You are immediately fighting. You are engaged. It does such a good job.
Yeah, I think so often we think of like when people say good storytelling, that can often be misinterpreted as like a lot of words, a lot of lore, stuff like that. And I feel like this game is very good storytelling from the beginning because of none of that. Like, and it's like all the elements, the music that's like really ethereal, the bum bum bum, and it's like, what is that? What's going on here? Just like the shot of Eris praying, and it's like, who is that? And you won't see her again for another like hour or so, and then only for a second. Oh yeah, and then like even before the train, like the pull out shot of like showing you the entire city of Midgar. Like, that's amazing. That was so impactful too.
Yeah, you immediately know what your setting is. You have you're being introduced to like the core area. It is communicating so much to you without having to say anything to you. It's not like a lesser video game would be like Midgar, set on the planet Gaia. This is Toledo, Ohio, but with an actual nightlife to it, or something like that.
As I watched Advent Children, the movie, 2 hours before we started recording, and in some ways, like that movie starts exactly like that, except with the child being like, "Mako was a thing that made our lives better, but it hurt the planet." I would say, a storytelling flaw that it felt the need to sort of like tell you what the game Final Fantasy VII was, as if you didn't already know if you're watching this movie.
Yeah, which I know of some people who have stumbled into this problem because they assume like this is like some sort of like retelling of Final Fantasy VII. It's like, nope, it's just picking up. But no, yeah, it's an incredible opening sequence. It's also like indicative of like how the rest of the game is going to flow, because from there, like the opening stretch of Midgar, which is on paper, it is the prologue of the game. This is the appetizer, and it's already so filled with like game. There's a 6-hour game just within Midgar, validated by the fact that Final Fantasy VII Remake is strictly the entire Midgar stretch of the game, stretched out to a little over 30 hours. But it's almost exactly 6 hours. I remember because I played the game for the first time when Remake was coming out. I like made a point of screenshotting when I got out of Midgar, and it was again almost exactly 6 hours on the dot.
Oh man, I think it was 7 for me this time around, and I thought I was speeding through, so maybe not as brisk as I thought I was.
Well, I mean, like the other thing is like I had the quality of life improved version on the Switch where I'm able to play it at 3x speed, so I can like run through certain parts of it. So I'm sure like that factors into it a little bit.
Yeah,
so I'm able to speed up through a few random encounters. Yeah, no, but like, and then that's just sort of indicative of like the flow of the rest of the game. It's guiding you along. it's not going at like a hurried pace or anything like that. It is still distinctly an RPG. You can take in the environments and like absorb the details of the world, but it's very, very propulsive as a story. Like it's
Yeah.
always moving you to the next thing. And unlike a lot of RPGs, it's also built in a way where you can rarely get lost.
And the moments of stillness that sort of contrast like the action sequences are really well placed. Like it feels just very well paced, throughout. When the first time you get to Tifa's bar, it feels like, oh, I can breathe here and like sort of get to know. I can go around and press circle and see what this person has to say, or like visit this part of this town. And the same thing with like when you get to Eris's house for the first time, or actually one of my favorite sequences or moments is like when you're escorting Eris, or she's escorting you to Wall Market, and you just kind of like hang out in that little like playground for a little bit. And that's another thing I like, a weird detail about this game. When I was saying I like the weird stuff about this game is like they didn't need to have like this playground with this like Garfield looking slide, but it's just there and it's really unique and specific. And I remember when I came to like that part of the remake, being like, oh, there's the cat slide. They did it. I can finally walk around it and go up in it.
Yeah. Quick aside here, because you keep saying Eris. For our listeners, a big component that I forgot to mention during the No Country for Old Games section is the localization of this game. In the original PlayStation 1 localization, there was a very rushed translation process because, again, there was, they wanted to get this thing out in America, but they also didn't want to dilly-daddle. So that part was very rushed through, and they didn't get a lot of feedback, and they didn't have a ton of like time. So some things did not translate well. There's a lot of famous grammatical issues.
Oh, including the first battle where it's like, hey, be sure to attack this enemy when it has his tail up.
Yeah, it doesn't give you it doesn't give you correct information sometimes. Grammatical issues, like there's one early on, I think Ares, who is Aerith in every other version of the game, but in the original PlayStation 1 American release, it is Ares. Aerith is supposed to represent air, earth, because of Aerith's role in the story as like representational of nature. Her name is like the big famous translation error. So people who originally played this game have a different default name for her in her head. And then also like early on in the game, she'll say something like "this guy are sick" instead of "this guy is sick" or "these guys are sick."
That's
She'll
true.
be, "this guy is sick." Yeah, the cussing that we're familiar with is also like more of an American affectation, and a lot of it doesn't make sense in context, like the bleeps. Like
that's true.
Barrett early on describes like the architecture of Midgar's city is like a bleepin' pizza.
Yeah.
In Japan, it's translated as rotten pizza, which is a very evocative image, and I think it's the name of one of the tracks on the soundtrack.
Yeah, I think it is. Like below the rotting pizza.
In the game, the original game itself, he calls it bleepin' pizza, which is like, what is the bleep? Is it fucking shitty pizza? I don't know.
The shittin' pizza. Yeah, I guess so, because I guess like rotten can sound like a like, oh, these rotten jerks, as opposed to like having literal rot is probably how he means it.
Yeah, but like other future versions of this game smooth out a lot of the translation localization issues. But yeah, if you're playing the PlayStation 1 version, which Mike has and continues to do, like you will run into a few different things. And that's not to disrespect, because that PlayStation 1 version was good enough that it secured its legacy.
I also mostly just wanted to see the disc change screens, just for nostalgia's sake.
They have those in the Final Fantasy VIII and VII versions that I played. It'll say end of disc 1.
Oh, sure.
Which is like very funny. In my context, it's like I'm still playing the game. Like all I had to do was press A. But yeah, no, I get it though. Sorry, but you continue about talking about the virtues of this game.
Oh yeah, the other thing I wanted to say was like I just really like that whole like when you go to the first town past Midgar, I think it's called Calm, and you have that whole like, okay, Cloud's going to tell the story of Sephiroth and like what happened, like so you have that whole flashback back to Nibelheim. Aside from a couple spots in Final Fantasy VI with like Terra's parents, like it's maybe one of the first instances of like an extended flashback, a playable flashback in a video game I can remember. I always thought that was really cool, and it's pretty long. It's like maybe like almost an hour long because you're playing and there are a couple different sections up. There's a save point in the middle of it, like where you go back to the present and Cloud's like, hey, y'all want to save our game? I've been talking for a while.
Temp check.
Yeah, let me get that 10 out. But to me, like, I just always thought that was really cool, and it felt like the fact that this was happening in a video game, like, felt, very important and consequential to me as a player. Like, this is storytelling that was not, I'm not familiar with in a game. This is cool.
Yeah.
And like the twist of like you learn later in the game, like, oh, there's actually a lot of falsehoods to this story. That's also really interesting.
Yeah, it becomes like a Rashomon kind of thing. Or like, I guess not. I mean, like, I guess like the big part of Rashomon is like, how people see themselves, and Cloud is like delusions that are
right. It's not that he's lying. He's just kind of, he lied. My interpretation that he lied to himself enough that he's kind of forgotten that he was just like Soldier B. And he's kind of deluded himself, and like that whole crisis that he has in Act 2.
It's not like a narcissistic delusion though. Like he is like, it's like actual, like, this guy's fucked up. Like this guy like is deeply, deeply traumatized and like is coping with it through like this like specific interpretation in his head, and it's not malicious necessarily. It is just like how he is able to process this in a way that it doesn't make him become worse. And Cloud is a very interesting character, and like his name, and like you see things that like suggest like this guy isn't the most reliable narrator because he's having constant Akira headaches.
Sure.
His name is Cloud, as in like clouded judgment or cloudy memories, things like that. His name's a pun. The guy that people like uphold as like the emo king of whatever is actually just like a deeply mentally ill guy with a pun name.
Yeah, that very subtle pun of his name did not occur to me when I was 16 or 17.
It's a clue, but it's not like something to the point where it's like that's the whole reveal is. Right. Because like the game is very archetypal, but in a way that works in service of it and is part of its subversion. And part of the thing that makes it so great is like Cloud isn't the cool chosen one hero. He is a guy who is kind of a loser. He's not a loner because he's strong. He's a loner because he's weak and doesn't want to be seen as weak. He feels loneliness. He is a lonely person. He's sad. He is not stoic. And that's a very interesting angle for it. Aerith being the mage representation, like the she is representational of nature and is being hunted by the enemy because she is like the key to unlocking more of the nature that we need to colonize and mine and destroy. And she is as close to like a normal character asterisk as anybody. Like she talking normally, like talking in a way that like isn't like so like Shakespearean. Not that this game is Shakespearean as like other RPGs are, but like she's like, I'm spunky, she's funny. Aerith is a very funny character. She's more modern than we're used to seeing characters in RPGs be depicted. And Tifa being like the fighter representative, like the monk melee fighter, she is very strong. She's buff, she's ripped.
Yeah. And
in depiction, she is very soft and kind-hearted and concerned. And people who interpret these characters in other interpretations or of the stories, like even fucking Kingdom Hearts, wrongly depict these characters where like Aerith is like the soft, meek, kind of like quiet one, and then Tifa is like the strong, headstrong. You're missing the point. The point is like that these characters, none of these characters, not even Sephiroth, are who they are visually depicted as.
That's fun. I don't think I'd ever like made that connection. I mean, I sort of have intuited that, but I never really noticed like the sort of difference or like that juxtaposition of Tifa being like a brawler with her like being the one who's kind of like the most like, hey Cloud, do you want to talk about how you're feeling? It's really like being the most like empathetic character. That is interesting.
Yeah, it's just so interesting because like it's to the point that like I'm surprised that Final Fantasy VII Remake depicted Aerith and Tifa so well. Like Aerith is like the energy of here comes Aerith with a steel chair, which she does in Final Fantasy Remake.
Yeah, I'm replaying it now, and I'll be honest, I kind of like I didn't like really connect with Aerith that much in the original game, and like was like, oh, I wish I felt sadder about the part where she dies. But like I feel like there's something about like her character, I just never kind of got to know her well enough in a way. But I feel like the remake does a great job of like finally felt like, oh, I get who this person is. Like she says shit early on, like when you're kind of like going across the roofs in Sector 7, and like Aerith's like,
You
You worry too much. I'm not some princess who needs to be coddled. Shit.
And I thought, Eris said shit. Holy crap, that's cool. Like, I didn't know that was possible.
Why isn't it bleeped?
I sort of like put on this wrong idea of like, this is a girl that is going to try to talk me into coming to church with her. So like,
she's the flower girl, but she's not flowery.
uh-huh.
The cast is great. Love the cast.
Yeah, for sure.
Hello, Moonshot listeners. I want to play a game. Claudia and Nicole are being held in the basement of an undisclosed abandoned building. Their task is to watch every movie in the Saw franchise before the release of Saw X on September 29th and provide thoughtful analysis. Your challenge is to listen to them cover 2 Saw films a week in their new miniseries, We See Saw, every Monday and Thursday here on the Moonshot Network. Let the game begin.
Also, like, the conflict is just really well represented because Shinra, an electric company,
Yeah.
with a very unintimidating name, being like the perpetrator of the great evil, but also not being the main villain.
Yeah. That's well told, even though like at its heart, that's kind of like a classic like JRPG thing of like, oh, the bad guy's not actually the bad guy. Although I feel like you do a very good job early on of being like, yeah, Shinra is real evil though still.
No,
With,
yeah.
like when they're in that boardroom and they're like, price hike. We're gonna leave Sector 7 the way it is because we're terrible. Ha 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 ha.
Yeah. Let's drop a plate and then just destroy the slums real quick. They are an actual force of evil.
Yes. Animal blame avalanche.
Let's commit a false flag terrorist attack. God, I would love to see the forums in Midgar. Anyway, they're an actual threat, but they are also not the primary antagonists.
Yeah.
And even Sephiroth isn't like an S tier villain in terms of actual like dialogue, characterization, everything. He's representational, and that's
Yeah.
fucking great because that's the service of the story.
I noticed that this time around when I played where like the whole Nibelheim sequence, I actually wrote down, was like, Sephiroth seems so normal. It's like, oh, he's like the team leader. He just seems like very professional. He's asking about like, hey, your family lives here. You're going to visit your mom? And it's not until like the incident that it's like, oh, this is who this dude is going to be for the rest of the game.
The mother incident. He is like, he's a foil for Cloud.
Mhm.
And that is what is necessary to the story. Like when people hold him up as like the great villain, it's because he's got a great fucking design, A+ fucking design. Everybody,
Right.
awesome. The great theme of One Winged
Yeah.
Angel and like the boss battle, a great boss battle and execution too. He hits the notes that he has to on, you know, an epic level.
Yeah.
But like he doesn't have to be more than what he is. Like the conflict of Final Fantasy VII is we are destroying the world. The villain of Final Fantasy VII is our apathy towards the world being destroyed.
Sure.
The reason Shinra isn't the villain of the main villain is because, like, let's extrapolate to the real world real quick because this game is
Sure.
communicating something to us.
Wait, are you saying it's metaphor for the real world?
Yeah, what? What? No, this has happened. What? What happened? What did they do to us? It's literally like we kill the CEO of the electric company, which Sephiroth does in the game.
Mhm.
Do the bad things stop happening? No,
Right.
because like we can't wait around for something to happen, and when somebody else does something, it's not going to be enough. Immediately after the CEO is killed, they get a new guy.
Right. Who's a little bit worse.
Yeah. In real life, you can say like, oh, if we just get rid of 50 CEOs, all the carbon emissions will stop. No. Number one, because like we are all participants in contributing towards global warming in a way that's what we have to do is take action. We can't like be apathetic towards the fact that these things are happening, and you have to take action to take care of these sort of things. So if you destroy the CEO, okay, great. Here's a bad, worsty. There's always a person waiting in the wings. There's always somebody in the
Right.
world, somebody that is probably like 2 people removed from you who would kill to be
Yeah,
the guy who
yeah.
gets to be part of the machine that squishes bodies into blood and turns the blood into energy.
Yeah.
And yeah, Sephiroth as a representation of like apathy, as like I'm going to destroy the world because I don't believe in anything else anymore.
Right.
I'm going to like destroy the world and I'm going to live the life how I want to live it. And I'm going to live in service of me.
Right.
It's a great representation of an idea of apathy. And it also works in service of Cloud, who is trying to overcome apathy. It is a reflection of what he could be.
Yeah, very well said.
Yeah. What else do you love about Final Fantasy VII? Because I'm speaking very broadly here.
Another thing I like, and this is very personal to me, like I always just liked the idea of Coral Town and like that backstory with Barrett. I just thought that was like a really interesting part of the world. And like I grew up in West Virginia, and like my great grandfather was a coal miner. So like kind of seeing a sort of version, a Final Fantasy version of that represented in a game was really interesting, especially like with the history of like West Virginia with like labor movements and these coal and chemical corporations just sort of like draining the resources of the land and exploiting the people that work for them. Like that always really connected with me, and I always sympathized with Barrett in that backstory where he's like, hey, listen, like coal's done, we should be moving over to like this Mako energy. Then sort of seeing years later like what that turned into, and you get to know like why Barrett cares so much about the planet and about like Avalanche, that he has his personal stake in it, especially like that whole when he finds Dine down in the that part is like really bleak. That struck me as like the darkest part of the game, and Dine's like, hey, fuck everything. Like I want to just kill whoever. I don't care if Marlene lives or dies. She'll just get to meet her mother sooner. Like, it's like really dark, and I was really struck by that this time. You're right. I'm talking about what I like about this game.
No,
I'm
it's
like, here's this terrible, dark, awful
it's this
storyline.
perfect build off of that point about apathy. So like I appreciate it. Like characters who have like their side stories are like them trying to overcome some kind of like mental barrier to get them to really care. And like in Barrett's case, like he was obviously the instigator of we got to destroy the Mako facilities. He's the one that basically like puts the plot into motion. But you can argue that like he was doing and I mean he says as much of the game, like he was just doing the right thing for the wrong reasons with like the wrong mindset. And by like seeing Dai now down there, like going back and like confronting his past and his role within that recalibrates his like reasoning for doing the things that he's going to do. He's going to do this out of like a love and not much of like a self-hatred or like a doing it for the sake of like getting even or getting back or like to wash his hands of a previous sin. He's doing it because like I got like I'm doing this out of a love for what is and what remains, and not because of a shame of what was.
Yeah.
If that is a sentence that remotely makes sense to anybody.
No, to me it did.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you can fix it in post if it doesn't make sense.
No, I'm not gonna. I'm gonna keep it in there.
Nice.
And then like like with Yuffie, who is a completely optional character, even though it has like a really interesting connection with the plot because the Wu Tai, right? That's like a whole thing. And it's barely touched on, and it is completely missable, the big beats of it.
I screwed up this time around. Like I was like, oh, I'm gonna wait till disc 3 to do the Wu Tai sequence, and apparently you can't. I didn't know that, so like I missed out on that part. And that I could still like do the tower and like get the summon material from her dad. Although I was very overpowered, and I just kind of like went in and she just like 2x attacked each character and just knocked them out like that. So I was like, oh, I should have done this right as soon as I got the tiny Bronco.
Like even the missable characters, like you again missable, and it's a problem. I would cite that as basically a flaw of the game. Like I like the idea of like there being like optional party members who have such rich stories to them. In most cases, I would consider that a virtue, but in execution, since they are almost so good that by making them missable, you're missing such important stuff.
Yeah, and same with like Vincent and his wife Lucretia being like so central to like Sephiroth's story. Like, and that's another thing, like you just will be lucky if you go to this waterfall and find her hanging out there. Else, that's very missable.
It's like if you miss Vincent, you miss the annotations of the book you're reading, this esoteric text. You're missing such crucial details that like we need to understand, and it's directly ties into his backstory. But like, you know, him being in a coffin and like having to like dig him out of that, and him like having like the whole like Cloud times 10 like emo whatever attitude about that, like shaking him out of his apathy so he can give a fuck about his wife in a way that's constructive. Or with Yuffie, like her dad was like a once proud figure in a very proud people who were at direct conflict with the Shinra at one point, and now has grown into like, well, what if we're the nature retreat for the people destroying the world?
Yeah.
The world is going to shit. I can at least make a buck off it and keep our village alive in that way. And it's another version of like that apathy where it's like monetizing the rot, I guess. And obviously Yuffie taking issue with that as like a younger person who was regaled with stories of how good things used to be.
Yeah, for sure.
And sees things as actively bad, and instead of being like put into submission or anything like that, she's like actively trying to make her own way in life. But again, that's not necessary. That's also naive because she's trying to do it in like a loner way, and almost like the idea of her being missable almost like runs counter to that, because if you don't encounter her in the game at all, then like that isolation is just kind of enabled in a weird way. Whereas like if you do encounter her and make her part of your party, which is also a process if you do encounter her, because you have to like do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, and the it's easy to miss her and also like it's really unclear in that whole dialogue exchange with. It's so easy and unclear like how to get her to join your party, with the questions you're supposed to ask her, the push and pull. It's like they don't want you to get her. They want you to miss Wutai. Yeah,
it is. Like it's kind of like, I don't know. I'm not going to say dumbed down, but like it's kind of brilliant the way that they structure this game, because when you do finally get out of the tunnel vision of Midgar, which is an incredible sequence, and for some people it's the highlight of the game, when you are exposed to the greater overworld and are taking in the actual colors and the greens and realizing that there is still a world to save and there's so much out there, there's only one other place you can go on the map. Like, it's not like one of those places where it's like, oh, there's 4 different towns. Why don't you talk to every single person in the town, and surely one of them will give you the next objective, as is standard of like other RPGs. It's like, there's one other place, go to that place, and that'll push you to where you can go to the next. And then it'll eventually, you can backtrack, and that's where like the side stuff and everything. But like you can play the story pretty linearly, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, for sure.
But like that also is kind of like, you can play it almost so linearly that you can miss the stuff like Yuffie and the Wutai stuff, which again is important to getting in a gameplay sense, materia, which changes how you play the game fundamentally. And also, you know, you're missing important background information for the greater world and the purpose that you're fighting for.
Yeah. That's another thing I like about the game is the materia system, which we haven't touched on. I think it's like a really satisfying like way to upgrade your characters, but also have it very flexible, you know, because you can very easily like slot out certain pieces, give it to other people, and the way that you can combine 2 different materia is really a great way to like customize your experience. But I would say also overpower yourself very quickly, which can be very fun.
Yeah, I haven't played the game in 3 years. Like I love the materia system. I remember liking it a lot, and that I was like scared of it initially because like extra mechanic in an RPG.
Yes.
Oh no. But it works very well. I want to know, like, did you do anything unique in this instance with materia, or like did you remember something from like your previous playthroughs?
I always like to give Cloud the add effect materia with transform, meaning that like randomly enemies will they'll be affected with small or frog. But then I found out this time around that if you do that with Hades materia, it'll be even worse. Like, so they'll get like small, confuse, silence, kind of like just just a huge like effects bomb will be like placed on these characters. And that was always fun to me. But my strategy is I like to give everyone a restore materia so that everyone can heal if they have to. Yeah, I definitely went and like a jerk. I went and I made a gold chocobo. I got Knights of the Round. I got W summon. So I beat Sephiroth in like 5 minutes, or I guess 10 minutes with how long the summons take. But I took the easy route by racing my chocobos and getting that overpowered materia. But the thing is, like, even though that materia is like way too powerful, you do have to work very hard to get it. So it does feel like you are working for it, and you are like working in the confines of the game to like make it work for you.
Yeah, no matter what happens, if you're playing like anything longer, you're going to get stronger usually,
Yeah.
or like be better at the game in some way. So it would make sense that like it is like the game that you have to play with yourself. Do you? Because like also if you don't have a guide, you have no idea. Am I done with the game in a sense where it's like I
Sure.
can beat this final boss, and I'm like there's like 20 more hours of like side content I haven't touched yet, and
Right,
if
right.
so, I can go and beat the boss and then do the rest of that side content, or I could do all that side content and then beat the boss, make it a clean win. That's the thing you have to wrestle with yourself as a gamer all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I had to do that recently with like Tears of the Kingdom. Like when I fight this final boss, do I want to do it so I'm not too overpowered and still have like a bunch of shrines left over? Or
Yeah.
do I want to do all the shrines and then do it? And then like the boss is a pushover. I don't know.
I kind of like working so that the final boss is a pushover, so that I feel like I've earned it at that point. It feels like this was too easy, but it's because I got so good. It's because although I didn't get good, I don't know. Maybe I'm doing it all wrong, but
Like with all good RPGs, the final boss isn't the hardest boss in Final Fantasy VII. You have like the Emerald and the Ruby monsters that you have to fight otherwise. So there's other stuff you want to do if like, oh, Sephiroth was a pushover, let me go. Like, oh my god, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I think like a final boss doesn't necessarily have to be controller throwing difficult. It just needs to be cinematic or
Yeah.
deliver on like the themes. And like the Sephiroth fight does that. The
For
final
sure.
fight in Tears of the Kingdom does it, and that's what it's important for at the end of the day.
Yeah, I had forgotten this has a really effective ending. I don't spoiler alert, but like
No,
you
go
have
for it.
the whole battle, but then the very last part of the battle is like just Cloud, just a stripped down Sephiroth, literally because he's just like shirtless, and the only thing I think your only option is like your limit break Omni Slash comes up. You just do that, and that's the final like move that you do is just like taking away all like the grand like the angel wings and all that. The rest of the party's gone. It's just two of you in a room together with swords. You hit them once, and that's it.
Yeah.
And that just feels like a reward to me.
Mhm. And let's speak to that ending real quick because I saw like a post going around a while ago where people had different takes. It was like Game Facts like 2001 level discourse that I was seeing on Twitter about people arguing about like is Final Fantasy VII one of the best endings of all time, or is it one of those like disappointing endings that you didn't get because it doesn't like spell out. It doesn't have like one of those endings where it's like the Goodfellas ending or anything like that, where like this person would go on to do this at this exact
Sure.
date and time. It lived a happy life or anything like that. Because like after that Omni Slash, and like you said, it's literally down to you
Mhm.
and Sephiroth. It's like, okay, well, what happened to my party after we won?
Yeah.
What happened? What happened? Where did they go? Like, it doesn't like have like a long conversation with your party about like, we did it, guys. We won. Let's all go and do something. And then it cuts the credits, and then you see Barrett reunite with his daughter and Tifa
Yeah.
go back to the bar or anything like that. Because again, Gaia has fundamentally changed. And I guess I want your take on like the ending and how you choose to interpret yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. Like I had forgotten a lot of the ending until seeing it recently. There are parts of it I like and parts of it I don't like. To me, I feel like there's a lot of business. It seems like there's a lot of business about like getting out of the crater that seemed a little like I kind of didn't need all of this. Like I kind of wanted this feels like padding a little bit.
Perfunctory, you'd say?
Yeah. And I would say, at least to my ear, it was kind of like some of the weakest like use of music in the game. There's this term called like Mickey Mousing, where it's like if the music is like too like on the nose about like every twist and turn, and I feel like it kind of does that. It'd be like, oh, the airship's turning this way, so all the flutes and strings are go blah, 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 and hit like a big discordant chord before it all then hits a happy chord to let you know it's all right. It kind of felt like, oh, they're spelling out a little too much of this, and I'm not even sure why we're here. But like the sort of ending, like where it's like 500 years later, and you see possibly Red 13, possibly his descendants, like, and like a moss overgrown Midgar. I'm okay with that. I thought that was a version of a good ending, and to me, it doesn't. My interpretation wasn't that like, oh, humanity's done for. It was more like Midgar is done for, perhaps, and like humans have sort of moved on from Mako, and we're seeing like a green, verdant world that is like in recovery or is recovered from the life stream being damaged.
Right, yeah. I think the ending is like, okay, Holy is ultimately summoned and they do destroy the meteor, and then like some rigmarole happens, and then like, cut the credits. And then like I do very distinctly remember like, it is 500 years later.
Oh, and that's post credits, isn't it?
Yeah, it is post credits, yeah.
Oh, and there's that you just see like Aerith's face for just like a split second right before it like cuts to black.
Yeah.
That's pretty
like,
cool.
You hear children laughing in like the ending.
Oh, yeah,
so it's like life went on. It's not like I don't think this is like an ideological like test whether or not you like the ending of Final Fantasy VII. I'm not going to like reduce it to that.
Yeah.
But like when you see a city overgrown, do you inherently see that as like humanity is gone? Because that's not necessarily true.
Yeah. Video games have made me taught me to think like, oh, something bad's happened here. I think Last of Us when I think of like overgrown cities. But I think in that case, especially with like you talk about the children laughing cue, I think, and who knows, maybe they added that because they had to like make you kind of push you away from that idea. But like to me, that does say like, oh, this is a happy ending.
Yeah, I feel bad. I can't remember Red 13's real name right now, but like that, I think that might go into like, yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Because I feel terrible calling him Red 13 because that's his slave name or whatever.
Right.
But I think it's another like minor issue I have with the game where it's like I can't change his name when he accepts his real name or whatever.
Oh, is that true? It won't let you.
Yeah, like you when you first joined your party, it's like, what's my name? And then like it's already filled out to Red 13, and then like you don't find out like his real name until after the fact, and it's like, oh shit, I'm sorry, man. I promise when I remember to replay this game, I'll call you that.
That's very
but
good
like
point.
yeah, I can't. It's not in like the front of my mind anymore that like what his real name is, because it's like you're still fucking Red 13, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We'll get you a new collar. I'm not a collar. I'm sorry. You're not a slave. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it seems like that would be nice to like give you the option to like change his name like after like that sequence in like Cosmo Canyon.
I would love that too, because like it would also lead to an extremely funny moment for the player where it's like you can rename the player and it's autofill to that, and you're like back poop or Taco Bell or whatever you're doing like the gimmick for.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Taco Bell's really good. That's a very yeah. I can't wait to call Red 13 Taco Bell next time I play the game.
But yeah, no, I think the ending is a positive one, but since it doesn't show Cloud getting married to Barrett or Tifa or something like that, it is open-ended in a way that Final Fantasy games traditionally have been and continue to be to a point. But like, I think Final Fantasy VII is like a good ending, especially like the bow at the end with seeing the family and the children laughing and like an overgrown monument, a monument to the folly of man returning to nature.
Yeah. I think it's probably important to leave it there as a symbol.
Yeah. We've praised this game. I love the gameplay. I love the narrative and like it actually trying to say something and how it depicts characters that we have sort of seen before, but in a new kind of way. What is it that you wish this game did better?
I mean, I think we touched on this earlier, but there are a lot of mini games.
Yeah.
It does seem kind of silly at some point, especially because some of them feel so inconsequential. It just feels like busy work, and some of them take a long time. Like the one where you have to like give CPR to that girl Priscilla. And it's also, I don't think that's how CPR actually works, where you just take the biggest breath possible. You fill your lungs with as much air and then just blast it all into the person in need of care. There's kind of that stuff. Even replaying it was like, there's still like a charm with how dumb it is.
There's a swing. It's definitely a swing.
Yeah, I like the bold swings.
Like, I don't necessarily think like, oh, these sequences should be cut entirely because they serve a narrative purpose and often take us from point A to point B. And unfortunately, the snowboarding isn't fun.
Yeah. Oh, the snowboarding's so weird because it's like, you don't get a practice run and it's so hard. It's so hard to like execute it well. But at the same time, it doesn't matter. Like, you can keep eating shit left and right, like on the snowboard. You know, you can't game over during that section.
It's like the arcade sensibility of like, all right, here the instructions go. And then you're like, what? And then like, I'm going to fail. And
Thanks
then you're going to get my quarter
sucker.
again. Yeah. It's like, I already paid $70 for the game. You won.
Right.
I'm playing the game. Why? And it's kind of like, well, we can't make the sequence long because like that would take up too much time. And it's like, but we also had to create a new gameplay system and we want you to keep playing and learn the system enough to like, and this will never come up again, by the way. What?
Yeah.
I do like the motorcycle.
Oh, that is a fun one. The music in the motorcycle thing is really memorable too. And it's also like it's sort of like your like, you know, the sequence that like ends the Midgar sequence, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, I like them as like cinematic set pieces that you can participate in. It's kind of like one of those things where it's like, like we complain about quick time events, right? But like back then we didn't even have that.
Yeah.
So it's like, I understand what this game is doing because it's like we're a blockbuster video game. We are fully in the mindset of like passion-based development. Like at this point, we are no longer in the sense of like we are making a game to save the company. We're making a game to make the company greater.
Sure.
And it's like we can't just make an RPG. We have to break these sequences up with new gameplay things to keep the player engaged, to make this game feel bigger and more monumental. How can we do that? And I just see like I'm just thinking of like some guy being like, a submarine? I don't know.
Yeah, there's so many modes of transportation. It's still funny to me that there's a boat that is basically just a broken plane.
Yeah.
It's so silly.
Like, I kind of love that because it's like, it makes the game feel bigger that you have so many modes of transportation that are so context specific.
Yeah.
But I also hate that submarine sequence with a passion.
Yeah. It's so weird. I mean, I kind of don't mind like later when you can just kind of chill in the submarine and like find the key of the ancients and all that and avoid the terrible emerald weapon down there. But yeah, that sequence of like avoiding the mines, somehow I was able to cruise through it this time pretty easily. But I remember thinking like, what's going on here? Why am I doing this?
Why is it so slow?
Why can't I just have a battle? Oh, you know what else? The Fort Condor battle. It's just the worst. And I spent like all of my money like trying to like get all the pieces and like having a strong little army. And it still wasn't enough. The only thing you get from not like losing Fort Condor battle is you don't have to like do the boss fight. And then I did the boss fight and it's pretty easy. So I'm like, oh, I could have just like lost and not spent, 30,000 gil on an army that's just going to get decimated.
Let's talk about Fort Condor because I have notes.
Yeah.
When I see those kinds of like side games, right? I think immediately, oh hell yeah!
Sure.
I love these kinds of like diversions.
Gwent.
Yeah, your Gwents, Triple Triad, even.
Horizon Forbidden West had a really good one too.
Yeah, but like some sort of like rudimentary, but like just engaging enough that like you can like glorified mobile game bullshit. Like the Chocobo stuff is good, right?
Yeah. Or I mean, actually, famously like Triple Triad in Final Fantasy VIII is
exactly.
a great card game.
Triple Triad is great if you figure out how to like
and not do the random rule.
Like the Chocobo racing stuff in this game is like so good they made it a whole franchise.
Yeah.
But like I thought like, okay, hell yeah. Fort Condor, this is the first mini game that we're really running into after the bike section. What do you got? What is this like strategy game? I love this shit. What is this? What? Why is this bad? Am I playing it wrong? Why is this not good? I thought it was my fault the first time I did it.
Because, and it's pay to win.
Yeah. this gacha game bullshit.
Right.
Square. Whoever did that minigame specifically is the guy that's like getting the crypto.
Right.
NFTs is the way to go.
It's a tragedy.
I was so mad. Like I was like, this is up to that point. I was like, I see why this is like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
This is the greatest game of. Why is this here?
Yeah, that made me sad. I feel like that's just kind of like the Square NFT thing seems to have like maybe died down. Maybe that's just a thing of the past.
I think it has a little bit.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure they'll find a new grift to fall for.
Yeah.
But that specific thing is gone.
I wish the grift they would fall for was turn-based combat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm interested to see if they try and even do Fort Condor in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
Did you play the Yuffie DLC?
I haven't played Integrate yet. No.
Integrate. Well, basically they do have a Fort Condor, like it's like a very popular like board game in the world, and it's actually really good. So I think you'll like it.
Hell,
I was like,
yeah,
okay, this actually feels like a good game now.
I'm gonna boot it up right now.
Yeah, it's great, and you get to it really quickly too. Like,
good.
You get through the opening section, and you're like, "Here's a town." And someone's like, "Hey, you got a board?"
I needed that. I needed that reassurance that something good came out of this. Otherwise, like the consequences, I get to play the game normally. That's a reward. A boss fight. That's why I love video games.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, in terms of things I wish the game did better, like outside of like the mini game stuff, like some of the platforming stuff is a little weird.
Oh yeah, it's a little hinky. Yeah.
Yeah. And slow. I see why they like put in like the 3x speed option.
Yeah,
the future editions of the game, because like it takes quite a few seconds to go from like one ledge to another cloud.
Oh, and that reminds me, a thing that's so weird about this game is like the orientation of the control is like very context sensitive, or like all the interiors are, it's not just always north, south, east, west with the D-pad or even the analog stick. Like you really have to like orient your brain to like, okay, they kind of want me to like think of this as north, so I have to angle in this direction. It's always a little unintuitive to me.
Yeah, that's the PlayStation 1 though. It's borderline Resident Evil tank controls where like
that's true.
All right, we're pressing up and now we're going up. Okay, camera angle has changed, but I've not let go of the button, so the character is still moving in a direction. Oh, hold on, there's something to the left. I'm moving to the left. Now let me press up again. Oh, I'm going backwards now. Uh-oh.
Yeah, they're still figuring them out.
I accept that as like, pre 3D fully realized worlds, because you're it's 3D in the sense you're a 3D model on a 2D background. We're not there yet.
Right.
So I accept that. But man, does it never get better.
That's true. Yeah, that's the thing. It's not a thing. It's you never get used to it is the thing, because every 2-dimensional background is like a little bit different.
Yeah, like I accept that like these are games that simply do not get made anymore. And the 2D background stuff is really cool and smart in the sensibility of the time. So I accept that.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it is still frustrating to control.
For sure.
Yeah. But like if the problem with the game is like, the mini games, just like a company got too ambitious and tried to mix it up a little bit. I mean, that's a great sequence. I do have 2 notes, and it's kind of like stuff I want to talk with you because it's kind of like elephant in the room shit with Final Fantasy VII.
Sure.
We talked earlier about how Barrett is like the first black character in the game. Obviously not qualified to speak on the nuances of like depiction and all that in terms of like representational, but like there is like a very
stuff on my list too. I see where you're going.
But we can at least like very obviously like notice that this is not a fully positive depiction of a black character in a video game, especially in a localization which throws in cuss words where they don't belong, and he is designed on a very visual level to look like Mr. T.
Yeah, for sure. Even back in the 90s, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way of like, oh, this doesn't feel good to my ears. It feels like certain patterns of his speech feel like they're just modern or modeled after like stereotypes that are a little uncomfortable today as well as 20 years ago. Oh, there's plenty of like casual sexism in the game, which is upsetting. Just like in terms of like characters being like, but you're a girl, you can't go on this mission, that kind of thing. Oh, and also, I mean, Sid is just terrible to his like partner, Shira. Like, similarly, like, when I played the game in 1997, I was like, this doesn't feel okay. And I play it now, I'm like, oh, this really doesn't feel okay. He's really terrible to her.
That's something I completely forgot about because like I was in denial about it a little bit, where it's like, surely this is going to turn around in like some way where like Sid really reckons with his behavior here, because he's a good guy in Kingdom Hearts. But
It's true. And I feel like they try to story-wise be like, no, it's okay because he's like this because she ruined the rocket mission. And it's like, actually, that I don't think that does make it okay, Square.
it's weird because like almost none of the other characters that I can recall ever take out their failures on other people, even if the
Yeah.
failure isn't their fault. And it's strange for like a late game character like Sid, who I guess you're supposed to be endeared to by the end of his arc.
Yeah.
And I guess it's just kind of because like he's the quote unquote normal man at the end, then the perception of the developers of the game
Mhm.
kind of becomes like closest thing to a leader because he has the car or whatever
True,
to get
true.
around. When like Barrett was the leader already, because there's that sequence of the game where Cloud's out of commission, Tifa stays behind to take care of him, and he has to go through like his like acceptance arc,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
then like you go off and it's the rest of your party, which is I think a good sequence. I think it's good that like these things happen, but like it's weird that like
You
sort of
just change it up.
Sid is like kind of like assumed to be.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is the older white man, so clearly he's going to be our leader for the time being.
Yeah, which again, Barrett has been established as leader, and that's the thing
Yeah.
that like I try to reconcile again, and it's weird too as a white man try and defend any aspect of a stereotype, but it's I feel this way about Aerith in terms of like how she's represented, and I feel this way about Barrett, where it's like it's a problematic presentation of really good stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Like, because he still is a great character. Like, Barrett is still like a really well-rounded character
Hmm.
with some bad localization issues.
Bad localization issues. Like I understand probably like the intention was like big black character with a gun for a hand you're going to assume is like this, but in reality they're a good man who is a kind father and has much more going on behind him besides like what your initial impression of him is. However, that doesn't give the stereotyping of it an excuse where you could have like depicted the black man as looking like anything else, and
Sure.
I don't know.
It does feel like it's leaning into some of these stereotypes, and it feels lazy from a creation and storytelling point of view.
Yeah, especially since like the character designs are not. We're at the point where like you can't claim like, oh, the graphics were like this, so we had to exaggerate certain features, because like this game has 3 different art styles or
Yes.
possibly more.
Yeah.
There's the Playmobil kind of almost Astro Boy looking overworld characters,
Yeah.
and then like you have the more detailed like battle fighter sequences, and then you have their actual representations on
Mhm.
like the icons. So it's like weird that like Barrett gets to like bear the most negative parts of that as the one black character and the
True.
first black character in this franchise.
Yeah.
But again, like the side story with him and like the more complex parts of him are compelling.
Yeah, for sure.
Again, I know it's a game of subversions, but they leaned too hard into one particular characters. And I feel the same about Aerith. Again, like the problem with the Aerith death thing,
Mhm.
it's one of those things where it's like I understand what Aerith represents as like nature and innocence, but and like also the contradictory of that, like of her being like a fully lived girl who was more than just like the representation of innocence. She was a woman who had complexities to her.
Mhm.
She was a very individual character, and that makes the death more tragic. But it
Mhm.
also like it's a strange relationship to have with it, because you see how it's good, and you also see how it's very very bad
Mhm.
for that to happen to a character in service of story. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
also not qualified to speak on sexism.
No, I get that. Same. Yeah, I guess it's also if we're talking about this stuff, it's kind of hard to like also not. There's like some weird like just subtle homophobia kind of like
I wouldn't call it subtle.
okay, yeah. With like I mean, some parts of like the wall market sequence with like Cloud like having to like put on the dress. Some of that is like very cool, and it feels like yeah, this is kind of like not a big deal, and it's kind of like rad that he's going for it. But like I feel like every time there's like the bodybuilder men characters in this game, whether they're in like that gym or like in the honeybee inn, it feels like they are just very like a stereotypical like I don't even know how to describe it. Like I said, I feel this is wrong. I'm not sure if I can describe why.
Yeah, I mean, it's a thing that the remake fixes almost
Yeah, it's
entirely.
great in the remake.
All those sequences are
Cloud looks
fantastic.
amazing when
It's such a
yeah. Like that whole dance sequence. Oh yeah, and that actually leans into like a new mini game in the remake when he has to like dance in his dress. It's so good.
It's really good, and it's the best case scenario in terms of handling like a problematic aspect of something
Yeah,
that is
yeah.
like deeply 90s homophobia.
Right.
But like it was such a regressive thing of the 90s thing that immediately dated it.
Yeah, yeah.
It was hack then in the 90s. It was
Mhm.
hack in the 90s at that point.
Sure.
And like I'm so glad that they moved away from it miraculously in the 2020 remake. I say miraculously because it's video games.
You're right. Oh yeah, I did not have high hopes. I was like, oh god, what are they gonna do?
Wait a minute. Cloud? Is that you? Oh my god, that makeup and that dress!
Nailed it. I know. Thank you. Moving on.
They accepted it, obviously like took to heart what people had issues with and made it into a very transformative thing in a way
Mhm.
that like I am genuinely surprised by.
Yeah.
And again, I think that like with the Aerith thing, I understand like because another thing is Twin Peaks was a huge influence on this game's development.
Mm.
Sonically, you can hear it in a Nobuo Uematsu's score. Like there's so many motifs, especially in the early tracks of the game that sound so Twin Peaksy. It's very Badalamenti in its score, and it's so good. It's so good, and I can understand like Aerith because Aerith does serve like the same thematic purpose that Laura Palmer
Yeah,
serves
sure.
in Twin Peaks. But I think the way that Twin Peaks is able to move away from that is like Laura Palmer dies in the beginning, and that's the inciting incident.
Right.
And like you work your way backwards into like filling in the humanity of this person, and like that's how the tragedy is like spelled out for you, and like
Mhm.
who this person was and what they represented versus who they were. Because like Aerith is also not a fully innocent woman in terms of like, and not to say like Laura Palmer is guilty or deserved to die, anything like
Mhm.
that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying like this character deserved to live because they were a human, not because they meant something to you.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's just a complicated thing with Aerith because like the game does so well with the character for the most part up until a certain point, and then like has to like serve different purpose for the story in a way that like I don't know.
Yeah.
It's something I've been reckoning with since I played the game because I understand like I think a part of that's the reputation of the game where people like took that as like the grand big plot twist, where I think the grand big plot twist is actually the Sephiroth and Cloud, how Cloud really was as a kid and how he was with that scene where Sephiroth was presumed dead. I think that's
Right.
supposed to be the big twist.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think that's the thing that like at least for me, like emotionally resonates more and is more interesting to me.
Yeah. Because another thing is like, is Aerith really dead in like this narrative? Because like she's a part of the Earth and part of this like tribe, and like again, she's the last of her kind and a modern version of an ancient tribe, and like the push and pull with all that. I don't know. I would have liked to see more.
Yeah, for sure. I guess, and I was also thinking at some point I should do like, there is like a way you can play this game like the original with like a Game Shark code. I guess they had coded like a version of the game with Aerith like living, so there is like dialogue that exists in the game of her later in the game, which I haven't really researched too much of that to know exactly what she says or how she fits into the story, but still interesting.
Yeah, it is. Like taking 3 central characters off of the board around the same time because Tifa is taking care of Cloud, who's had a mental breakdown because of the truth of the things that were revealed to him, and then Aerith being taken out of commission because she died. It just doesn't feel like it's an even distribution of why these characters are taken out, I guess.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
I think that's the fundamental issue with it is like one character is treated as collateral in service of these other 2 characters.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
But Aerith had the weight of a lot of stuff put on her, and that's another thing that makes it difficult to talk about these things in a way that's so definitive.
Yeah.
What else do you have? Do you have anything else to say? And good or bad, negative mixed on
The only other negative I had, and I mean this is a quick one, I think, is just that it's really, I mean, I guess it can be a strength and a weakness, is that there are no character classes. So basically, every character is the same. You're really just, if you're going just on numbers, it's really like, what limit break do you think is most powerful? But in some ways that can be like kind of a bonus because you can really customize your party based on the characters you like, which is kind of what I do. Like I just tend to like having my main character. I mean, this is probably basic, but like just Cloud, Barrett, and Tifa are my favorite like crew. So, I can just roll with them and adjust the materia accordingly. And then like when there's a story reason where I have to use other characters, I can just like give them the materia that I've been like, building up with those characters.
Yeah, that's like replacing class with materia like makes a good shorthand for people who are likely coming into this game not having played another Final Fantasy game or just an RPG in general.
Yeah, that's true.
So it was a very good execution of that.
Yeah, so I wrote it down as a negative, and as I started talking, I'm like, actually, this is probably fine.
I think you're hitting a point though where it's like you as like a more seasoned fan
Sure.
would have liked more, like a version of this game that appealed to, or like some form of mode that would have like made it so you would be able to be more engaged with mechanics, because like people treat RPGs as like glorified menus.
Well, I think also like, a couple years ago I played Persona 5 like front to back, and I think that really like showed me how well like a turn-based combat system can be. Like that feels so finely tuned, and like every character feels important and has a unique role to play. You really have to be mindful about who's in your party depending on what section of the game you're in. That is very satisfying in a way that like you're not going to get from Final Fantasy VII, because like kind of anybody can do whatever you need them to do.
Yeah, that's fair. So we've talked about the good about this game, the very good, the stuff that isn't so good, the complicated stuff. Looking over everything holistically, what impact would you say that this game made on you overall?
Let's see. I mean, like I talked about this a little bit, but like this came to me at a time when I was sort of like not that invested in video games. And so when this appeared on my radar again, it really like kind of brought me back into the fold and showed me, what's capable in video game storytelling and setting. Also in 1997 showed me like a trajectory of like what this medium is capable of and what I would have to look forward to. And, because following year I was playing Metal Gear Solid and seeing like another cinematic story told with polygons.
Yeah.
And I think, Silent Hill 2 was a big deal for me around the same time. It felt like video games were growing up with me, and like this wasn't a hobby that I had to leave with my childhood.
Very well said.
Thank you.
Would you say like it's informed your taste in games in the years since, or any sort of media that you seek out?
Yeah, I mean, like there's like I mentioned, I really like a cozy slum in a video game. Something that like recently appealed to me was like, let's see, it's a Netflix show, but I didn't work on it. Am I allowed to talk about it? Yeah, because I didn't work on it. So like Arcane on Netflix, like really gripped me. Like and I think part of that for me was the setting. Have you seen it?
I've it's been on my list forever because
Yeah.
that came up in the Mass Effect episode that I did.
Oh, right. Yeah, and like I've never played League of Legends, so I don't have any, horse in that race, but like it's actually very similar to Midgard, where it's like there are slums underground and like above them is like the elite upper class people.
Yeah.
And it's kind of got a very similar like lighting scheme where it's kind of dark and dingy with like a lot of green lighting, very 90s feel in a way, and with like really cool, interesting characters. So I feel like there's a lot of Final Fantasy VII DNA in that I just kind of happened upon. Yeah, it's weird. I watched like the first episode of that when it first came out, and I was like, oh, this is great. I got to keep watching. And I stopped. And I didn't finish it until like maybe a week or two ago. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad I finally like got back into this. And it takes some big like swings, like 3 or 4 episodes in that I did not see coming, and were very satisfying. So go watch Arcane. I think it's great. And especially if you like Final Fantasy VII. But I think also like if you have fallen off of like RPGs, because like of the sort of like, Square going away from turn-based combat in these games, like Persona 5 was something that really resonated with me, both setting-wise and like gameplay-wise. But also Chained Echoes, which came out last year, feels like it has a lot of Final Fantasy VI DNA in it.
Oh, okay.
Like Persona, like very well thought out turn-based combat. Oh gosh, like Octopath Traveler 2 is also really like another example of like, well, this is a direction that like Final Fantasy could have gone in if they had
Mhm.
stuck with turn-based.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Any other like sort of media that you would like shout out as like something like that we haven't mentioned like in the core discussion that would relate to this while we're on the subject?
I think those are the ones. I think that's all.
Okay. I have one. I normally have like a million things that's like, well, if you like this reminds me of this, and yeah. But like, I really only have one for now.
Mhm.
I watched this movie literally yesterday instead of Advent Children. Well, it's called Metropolis, not the Fritz Lang film. It's a 2001 anime film based on a manga by the creator of Astro Boy, Osamu Tezuka. It's a movie directed by Rintaro, produced by Madhouse, and the screenplay is by Katsuhiro Otomo, who is the creator of Akira, both the manga and the director of the film Akira.
Oh, cool.
So it's basically like an all-star sort of anime film. So many different like major forces in the creative industry all working together to make this thing. It was obviously produced well after the death of the Astro Boy creator, but it is distinctly in his art style.
Mhm.
And it's not a direct adaptation of the Fritz Lang 1927 film Metropolis. It has the same name, but in a lot of the same thematic ideas, visual cues, themes. It's very influenced by it, but it's not a animated adaptation of that film necessarily. But because it's animated in Tezuka's art style, which you can sort of visualize in your head if you're familiar with Astro Boy, the characters are very much proportioned to like the overworld models for the Final Fantasy VII characters. And since it's a story about like a futuristic city with a vibrant looking upper level and the underclass underneath it all oppressed because of the illusions, the necessary like processes of what we do to maintain the illusion of the top upper level.
Mhm.
It's very in theme with Final Fantasy VII. Like those slums look almost like directly as they would in Final Fantasy VII.
interesting.
So
I should check that
Check
out.
out-
It sounds awesome.
yeah, so Metropolis is very good. While we're still on the subject of Final Fantasy VII, you're a musician. You said this is your favorite Final Fantasy soundtrack, and Uematsu is like one of your core influences. Do you have a favorite track from this game?
Yeah, I mean, I know this is probably a basic answer, but it's that overworld theme. It's just so good. I can't believe it's like 7 minutes long, too. I mean, like that core ba-na-na-na-na, that's great too. I like that it highlights the 7th scale degree, and this is the 7th game in the series. That's cool. Oh yeah, I also love like it takes a lot of weird directions. There's that kind of later section where it's like ba-na-na-na-na-na-na, and it feels like it's really kind of plotting and like mysterious in a way that it didn't have to, and I think it's really cool. It has all these very interesting chord changes that are just really, they're just very unexpected and unusual. And I know that was something for me that I like really wanted to like study so I could learn like what are these like chord relationships? How do I recreate this in my own work? But aside from that, like all the main themes are just great. Like Eris, the scene, Eris Eris, how would you say that? Eris's theme is just lovely, and the arrangement's really lovely. Tifa's theme is great too, but even some of the like non-main tracks are really well done and like iconic to me. Like that first one called Anxiety is what the track's name is, and it just has these like interesting chord changes where it's just those strings that are kind of going ba-na, ba-na-na. To me, that is just like what like Sector 7 sounds like. Even that goofy Don Corneo music is really just memorable to me with that ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da. That just really is always like stuck with me. So like, but I think more importantly than that, I think this game really uses those themes well, like not just in their main iterations, but like in little reprises. In, you know, there are bits of Eris's theme in like that. I think the track is called like the flower in the church or something like that. The one ba da 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 da, but then it plays Eris's theme over top of that. That's really lovely, and just there's so many iterations of that overworld theme, ba da 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 da, even in like minor keys, in sort of like over weird different chords to kind of create different vibes of like unease or even happiness, like when it needs to. It's such like a good like simple theme. It's recognizable, so it's easily like transposable to like other situations in a way that feels like very cinematic to me and very like musical theater to me in a way. Just having a strong melody and knowing how to like manipulate it to suit the atmosphere. And I almost like was planning on like doing like, what if I do some like music like theory stuff in this discussion? But then I found a podcast that did it. I mean, there are like hundreds of like YouTube like dissections of the music of Final Fantasy VII. But again, have you heard of Strong Songs?
Yes.
Yeah, which is Triple Click's Kirk Hamilton's his music podcast. And he does a breakdown of the music of Final Fantasy VII where he kind of like, and I only found this recently. I was like, oh, this is kind of exactly what I would have talked to, but he just did a much better job than I would have. Where he does break down how that theme works and how it's built and how it's used. And also how it's used in the remake too, in ways that are like, it's really interesting to me as someone that like understands music theory really well, but I think he does a good way of explaining it to someone where you don't need to have like a music background to appreciate it.
Right, a layman's ground.
Yeah, he's really good at that.
That's good. Yeah. Like really speaking very quickly to the music, you're very thorough and very thoughtful, and like you being able to like put that into like, you know, the language of music in a way that really highlights how good and complex these tracks are is chef's kiss. Great. Thank you. Because I was like, my nose was like, I like Anxiety because it sounds like the Twin Peaks music, and which is true. But like
that'll probably connect to your listeners more than what I said.
People play music and listen to music all the time. I would say, yeah. I love that. I mean, like I have a high schooler's understanding of music because I only did band through high school. But
what instrument did you play?
Clarinet.
Oh, great, cool.
Yeah,
I don't know how to play that one.
Yeah, and then like I was like way more into drama though, so like that's the stuff I really bothered to like really learn the language of.
Cool.
But yeah, no, I also really, and observant listeners will know, I really like the Wall Market theme.
Oh
that,
yeah,
like, heavy bass. Yeah, there's some reason that just like is like the one that like really scratches at my brain because I'm a huge fan of the bass. Like it's why I like really latch on to bands like Pixies and Talking Heads. It's because they're so bass heavy.
Cool.
So yeah, that I always think about the Wall Market theme, and I was thrilled when it showed up as like a weird remixed battle theme in Final Fantasy VII remake.
Oh
yeah. I was happy with that. But yeah, that is everything I have to say about Final Fantasy VII. Would you like to stick around while I read these reader comments
Oh, please.
or listener comments? Yeah. Uh, reading a podcast. What is this? I asked listeners what their feelings were on Final Fantasy VII, and unsurprisingly, this is the most feedback I've ever gotten doing this segment. So I have a few that stand out to me. At Lallysup said, favorite game and changed my life. Quick story. When I got out of rehab for opioids and was kind of directionless and didn't know what to do, I booted up a new save and played through while in a sober house. A cathartic experience of returning to my first love of video games, which I thought was a lovely message. Thank you for writing that in.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. At Will Myers Music, on more recent replays, I've realized how much of Cloud's identity crisis can be read through a gender lens, and that makes the game and his character way more compelling to me. Smiley face.
Oh, wow.
Another lovely comment. Really appreciate that one. At cron.com, the economy of FF7 storytelling, textual and visual, still astounds me. The Midgar section communicates so much in a small amount of time, and then the map opens up and you realize your understanding of the game's world is still so blinkered. It's amazing. Lovely comment. And at Jane Altoids, who was my guest on the Tekken 2 episode, she said, its message of environmentalism in the face of a planet-destroying corporation that runs the world has made the story hold up very well. Correct.
For sure. When it's more prescient day by day.
Listen, it was really awesome to have you on the show, Mike. You have been such a wonderful and awesome guest. Before you go, please promote the hell out of yourself.
Hey, thanks, man. Yeah, it has been a pleasure being on here. Thank you so much. Thank you for when I reached out about writing a theme song, not telling me to fuck off. I appreciate that. But here, your listeners can find me at mypettry.com. That's Pettry, 2 T's. And that's kind of like the hub for anything I'm doing, or you can find like links to music and social media there. Basically, I'm at Mike Pettry on Twitter, which I'm not going to call it X at that. Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. I don't know which one of those I'm committing to yet. We're all still figuring it out. I host
truly the like Tifa or Aerith or Barrett of the modern age.
Exactly.
Who did you go on a date with at the Golden Saucer segment, which we never brought up at one point at all?
Tifa, I think.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think it's usually just kind of always nudge me towards Tifa just because I have better interactions with her.
Okay. Sorry, continue.
Oh, sure. I also I host a podcast called Bit Parade. We release very sparsely, and that's a podcast where me and my co-host Eli Bolin play old video games and we write songs about them in real time, but then also drop like a fully realized demo of the song at the end of every episode. And if that sounds boring, except for the song part, you can just find the songs on Spotify. Just follow Eli Bolin or me, or look up Bit Parade. And also my music's on SoundCloud, Bandcamp. And if you go to YouTube, you'll find two sort of like chill hop study music versions of Eris's theme and Tifa's theme. And what else? I'll try to wrap it up. I promise. I just do so much stuff.
You're good.
You can also play Epic Dumpster Bear 1 and 2 and Jank Brain on Steam or Switch and PS4. Those are games I wrote music for. And I'm thinking about going back to Twitch at some point. I don't know. I have this terrible idea that maybe I'll like play all the Souls games, which I'm no good at. Because I enjoyed Elden Ring, so maybe I can embarrass myself publicly by playing Dark Souls. I don't know, we'll see. But that's it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. Obviously, I'll put the link of everything in the description of this episode, because I always have the link of your stuff in the description of this episode, because you wrote a wonderful theme song for this show.
Thank you.
And thank you for writing that theme song. Thank you once again for being such an awesome guest. And thank you so much for listening to this episode of Select and Start. Once again, I'm your host, editor, and promoter, Keifer. If you enjoyed this episode, please give the show a positive review wherever you're listening to this. Engagement helps the show, and your feedback will improve it. And if you want to get more engaged, give the show a follow on Twitter at SelectPodStart. If you have any thoughts about Final Fantasy VII or any other games we've discussed, send a DM or leave a comment, and I will gladly read it on the show. You can also support me on Patreon. If you pledge at least $1 a month, you will get early access to new episodes as well as extended episodes with exclusive content. That's on patreon.com/Keifer's Corner. You can find a link to that and the rest of my projects in the description of this episode. Select and Start is on the Moonshot Network, which is supported by its own Patreon. Find out more on moonshotpods.com. The art for the show was made by my best friend Avery Ott, and the show's theme song was composed by Mike Pettry. You can check out the links in the description for their work. And Mike's right here, so say hi.
Hi.
All right. I think that's it. All right, everybody, let's mosey.
I'm curious about Zach. I've always been curious about to know more.
I'm not.
And
sorry.
that's okay.
I'm sorry, Zach fans. He just seems like a war criminal.